We are in a crisis mode, trying to get as much emergency supply as possible across the board when it comes to homeless accommodation, when it comes to asylum seeker accommodation. However, to the challenge, and we have space and capacity for it, because a lot of people go hashtag of Ireland is full when Ireland is not full.
So are we still the land of 100,000 welcomes, or is that gone?
I think we still are. Maybe it's at 90,000 at this stage. We don't want people having to sleep on the street, no matter where they come from.
Assignment was presented by me, Katie Flannery. It was produced by Bob Howard.
Good morning, Manitoba. Welcome to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, in today for Marcy Marcusa. With me today are Nolan Kaler, our studio director. May McKillop is our studio technician. Brad Lillies is producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. And Heather Wells is in the newsroom with the CBC headlines.
Good morning. Well, we are hearing, Emily, this morning from the mother of a 17-year-old killed on Sunday in Carman. Maya Grattan's body was found in a home where she lived with her cousin, Amanda Clearwater, Clearwater's partner, Ryan Manakizek, and their 3 young children. RCMP, as we've been telling you this week, charged Manakizek with first-degree murder in their deaths. Juliet Hastings believes child welfare authorities ignored her concerns about safety. We'll hear her speak about that coming up. As well, hundreds turned out in Winnipeg marching against violence against Indigenous women last night. Rallies are held across Canada every Valentine's Day. We're going to hear about that as well in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, this is what's coming up on the show. How much paid work should international students be allowed or expected to do? We'll hear from the Canadian Federation of Students for its point of view. We'll also talk to journalist Rami Khouri about the situation in Gaza and fears for the 1.5 million Palestinians who've been sheltering in the southern city of Rafah. Ahead of his show here in Winnipeg, legendary comedian Ron James tells us how he's learned to make fun of his mortality, a fractious political environment, and the everyday moments that make life absurd. But first, Blue Bomber great Ken Payne died at the age of 88 this week. The legendary quarterback led the Bombers to 4 Grey Cup wins. We'll speak to his former teammate Paul Robson on what he was like, both on and off the field. Quick look at the forecast for Winnipeg today, a mix of sun and cloud, breezy with a high of -12, partly cloudy tonight, becoming clear overnight and breezy with a low of -23. Mainly sunny tomorrow, breezy with a high of -12. In Brandon, mainly cloudy today, slight chance of flurries and clearing this afternoon, high -13. Clear tonight, wind becoming light, low -27. Tomorrow, sunny, becoming a mix of sun and cloud around noon and breezy with a high of -12. And we will have more after World Report.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Paul Giamatti has been in dozens of films and TV shows, from Private Parts
WNBC
to the Alexander Payne movie Sideways that he acted in 20 years ago. Now Paul's reunited with Alexander for the new film The Holdovers. He'll tell you about that and being nominated for Best Actor.
Presto, Cherry's Jubilee.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. A Liberal MP charged with defending Canada's foreign policy has been recorded criticizing the government's response to the war in Gaza. Toronto MP Rob Oliphant is a United Church minister. He is also the parliamentary secretary to Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs. CBC News has obtained a recording of him meeting with a constituent. In it, Oliphant says he has struggled with the Trudeau government's decisions and he's considered quitting his post. Evan Dyer has the details.
Do I believe there's genocidal activity on the part of Israel? Probably yes.
MP Rob Oliphant was nothing if not sincere in his Zoom meeting with a constituent lobbying him to back a ceasefire, but his remarks often strayed far from the party line.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's Oliphant's job to explain the government's foreign policy in Parliament. including its decision to defund UNRWA, the UN agency that supports Palestinian refugees.
Helping the crisis in Gaza. We are proud. Canadians want us to help.
But in private, Oliphant sounded anything but proud of that decision.
My heart hurts because the only way to get that aid there is UNRWA.
Oliphant described the decision to defund UNRWA as political.
It drives me crazy. It is opportunistic, it is unfair, and it is maligning the operation of a UN organization.
Rob Oliphant also criticized the Trudeau government's confusing response to the international genocide case brought against Israel by South Africa, saying it was a communications disaster.
I would not have done what the government did. I advised the government not to do that. Because I think it was misunderstood, and I knew it would be misunderstood.
Oliphant said he'd thought about quitting his post many times, but been persuaded that he could do more good by staying. Asked about the tape, Oliphant told CBC News it was a private meeting that he wishes had remained private, but that there's nothing he says in private that he won't stand by in public. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is joining his counterparts from Australia and New Zealand in raising concerns about an Israeli ground operation in Rafah. In a joint statement, they say such an operation would be catastrophic. The three leaders reissued their call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Here's what Trudeau said yesterday while meeting with Jordan's King Abdullah.
We need to see the release of hostages. We need to see a sustainable ceasefire. We need to see more humanitarian aid flowing in. We need to see stabilization in the region, peace, and we need to work on the two-state solution.
Rafah is the last refuge for about 1.4 million displaced Palestinians in southern Gaza. Canada's intelligence agency is keeping a close eye on threats to Canada's 2S LGBTQ+ community. Many of them are coming from what CSIS calls the anti-gender movement. The CBC's Catherine Tunney has the details.
It's disheartening, and also it's not surprising.
Alessandro Kelly is executive director of Fierté Canada Pride. He's reacting to mounting warnings from Canada's intelligence agency about potential attacks on Pride events and towards the community at large.
There is not a day that goes by that I don't open my computer screen or my television to see something that attacks our community.
A CSIS spokesperson says the movement poses a violent threat to the 2S LGBTQ+ community and could inspire an attack. A threat CSIS says will certainly persist over the next year.
We are concerned about hate-fueled marches colliding with Pride celebrations.
CSIS Director David Mignot raised the issue publicly in a speech late last year, calling out extremist actors.
Many of whom are consuming toxic media online, becoming radicalized, and may mobilize quickly to violence.
Kelly says he worries recent provincial announcements around things like pronouns and gender-affirming care will heighten the threat risk. A spokesperson for CSIS stressed not all rhetoric leads to violence, but added those belonging to the anti-gender movement may be motivated by other extreme views. Catherine Tunney, CBC News, Ottawa.
NATO defense ministers are meeting in Brussels. Officially, they're there to talk about more military support for Ukraine. But after Donald Trump's recent comments, some European countries are talking about starting their own common defense plan. Ishan Garg has more from Brussels.
Ramping up the supply of ammunition and bigger spending on defense from member countries. All of this is on the table as the bloc's defense ministers and the NATO-Ukraine Council discuss ways to expand more support to Ukraine. But concerns about the bloc's future are looming large. European leaders have urged the EU to decrease its reliance on the US and have called for more spending by the bloc towards a common European defense program, leading some critics to question, could the NATO soon become obsolete? But the Secretary-General of the 31-nation military alliance, Jens Stoltenberg, is urging Europe and North America to continue to work together.
And we should not pursue any path that indicates that we are trying to divide Europe from North America. The strength is that we have Europe and North America together in NATO.
Intelligence agencies have warned that Russia could double its troops along NATO's borders in the next decade. Stoltenberg says an increasing number of NATO member states are spending the targeted 2% of GDP on defense. Ishan Garg for CBC News, Brussels.
The Kremlin is dismissing U.S. warnings about Russian nuclear weapons in space. Moscow is calling it a malicious fabrication. Officials say it's just a White House trick to foster anti-Russia support in Washington. The CBC's Richard Madden is following the story for us. And Richard, what more do we know about this security threat?
Yeah, according to multiple reports here, this security threat relates to Russia's space ambitions and its plans to eventually develop a nuclear anti-satellite system designed to target U.S. satellites. And that's what caused the chair of the powerful House Intelligence Committee, Mike Turner, to issue that unusual, vague warning yesterday of a serious national security threat, saying he released details of it to all members of Congress and then urged President Joe Biden to declassify the intel. Now, this move caught the White House off guard and sparked high anxieties on Capitol Hill, forcing House Speaker Mike Johnson to go before the cameras and attempt to downplay concerns.
I want to assure the American people there is no need for public alarm. We are going to work together to address this matter. And beyond that, I'm not at liberty to disclose classified information and really can't say much more.
Now, since then, top U.S. officials have briefed its international allies, including Canada, and a meeting with top defense officials and congressional lawmakers is set for later today.
What happens next?
Yeah, I'm expecting we'll learn more details of this security threat as the day progresses, and really what motivated the House Intelligence Chairman to make this public one day before his scheduled briefing on the issue. Now, it's worth noting Congressman Turner is a defense hawk and a strong supporter of Ukraine in its war against Russia, and his statement was released just as lawmakers debate how the U.S. should deal with threats from Russia and its adversaries, including billions in foreign aid.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Prince Harry is in British Columbia today. He is promoting the first ever Winter Invictus Games. That happens a year from now. And as Lindsay Duncombe reports, it is a chance for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to regroup after a bumpy time.
Cheers greet Prince Harry as he glides to the bottom of the ski hill. He's in a sit ski, an adaptive device for wheelchair athletes, just one of the events that will be featured at next year's Winter Invictus Games. Prince Harry founded the Games for wounded servicemen and women. Rosa Sanchez Bermudez will participate in the alpine ski competition. She was shot twice in Colombia and uses a wheelchair. Through a translator, she describes meeting the prince.
Super happy. Emocionada. Yeah, very emotional.
The trip to BC comes as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex could use some good press. They just rebranded their website after the Hollywood Reporter put them at the top of the losers list for 2023. Recent polls have the couple trailing Queen Camilla in popularity. Victoria Murphy is a royal commentator.
So I think this is going to be a very important week for them. I think it's going to be a really positive week for them because even though the Sussexes do get a lot of criticism, I think people are really reluctant to criticise him at all in any way when he is with Invictus because everyone understands what an important cause it is.
Royal watchers can expect to see more action from the couple over the coming days. They will be at Whistler Sliding Centre later today and will participate in a wheelchair curling demonstration on Friday. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Whistler.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report News Anytime. CBCNews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Here's what's coming up on the show. We'll hear from the Canadian Federation of Students on why international students should be given the same rights to paid work in Canada as domestic students. We'll also talk to a journalist who was based in the Middle East for many years about the situation in southern Gaza and how the international community is responding. But first, it's been a tough week for the Winnipeg Football Club after learning 2 former Winnipeg Blue Bomber greats passed away. We'll hear more about legendary quarterback Ken Plain and running back and hockey player Jerry James, who both died this week. That's up first on Information Radio. You're listening to CBC Radio 1 from Winnipeg. It's 11 minutes after 6 o'clock. Time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the chief of Peguis First Nation has questions about a land flip involving a choice piece of property on Wellington Crescent. In 2022, a Peguis-controlled company bought the old Shriners Hospital from the province as part of their treaty land entitlement agreement. 6 months later, the trust flipped it to a private developer. The new chief, Stan Bird, is upset. He says land is important to his people. Without it, he says they don't have identity. We're going to hear more about this story. And it is winter party time. In the Paw, it is the Manitoba Trappers Festival kicking off for another year. And in Winnipeg, Festival du Voyageur gets going tomorrow. We'll hear more in our next local news at 6:30.
It is time to have a good winter party. You know, it's that time after Christmas and
You know
nothing
what? And
much
people
on the
are
horizon.
just tired of the darkness.
Yes. So let's have some campfires and music and get into it.
And it's going to be cold, so we get sun again.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's a blessing and a curse.
It is.
We'll take it. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. And our studio director, Nolan Kaler, is here now with a look at the weather and traffic.
Good morning, Emily.
Good
so
morning.
let's start up north where things are a little bit frosty this morning. We had an extreme cold warning to start things off up in the Churchill area. And that is resulting in some pretty more what you'd expect your February temperatures to be. I know we haven't really had a lot of those dark winter temperatures across the province, but this morning, wind chill values feeling like minus 43 up in Churchill. Mainly sunny skies, though, and you're looking for a high of minus 27 up there in Churchill, minus 38 with the wind chill. Here in the big city, we're looking at a mix of sun and cloud today with winds out of the northwest and a high of minus 12. Looking at wind chill values in around the minus 28 range for this morning. So do take care as you are heading out there to bundle up just a little bit more perhaps than you already have been. Currently minus 15 at the Forks. And good morning to our friends in Brandon as well, where it's currently minus 18. Looking at mainly cloudy skies and a slight chance of flurries for southwestern Manitoba this morning. And that'll be clearing up throughout the course of the day. And a high of minus 13 expected. Wind chill values there in around the minus 27 range. On the commute so far, Emily, not too much to tell you about. We're keeping an eye on Manitoba highways this morning as well, and I'm looking specifically at Highway 6 just north of Gypsumville and the intersection in around Highway 60 around the Paw. They are both reporting snow-covered sections and reduced visibility this morning, so take care if you're traveling on those highways. Nothing to tell you about so far in the city of Winnipeg, but if you see something out there, give us a call on the CBC commuter line. The number is 204-788-3093.
Coming up on 6:15, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. It's minus 15 right now at the Forks, so a bit colder than we've been used to lately. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. The Winnipeg Football Club announced yesterday the passing of former Blue Bomber Jerry James. He died Tuesday at the age of 89. News of his death came just hours after the club learned about CFL legend Ken Plain, who also died on Tuesday. He was 88. Plain led the Bombers to 4 Grey Cup victories in 1958, 1959, 1961, and 1962. Plain was one of the only CFL players to be touted as a star, both as a quarterback and as a defensive back. Paul Robson played with Ken Plain on the Bombers. He was also the former assistant manager of the team. Robson spoke with CBC's Faith Fundal.
I think when you first think about Ken, you think about him as a person. He was an absolutely outstanding person. He absolutely unpretentious. He and his wife Jan are just fabulous. When my wife Margaret and I came up from the University of North Dakota after I'd finished playing college football. I was a rookie, and Jan and Ken were most welcoming. And Jan introduced Margaret to her bridge club and made her feel at home in Winnipeg. And so, as a couple, they were just exemplary citizens of Manitoba and Winnipeg. and one of the early American players to stay in Winnipeg and make their home here after his playing career. He was, and so my first thoughts about Ken were not necessarily on the field, but off the field, and they talk about leadership these days, and basically, I think if you think about a leader is someone that you'd like to be like, and that you strive to be as good as he or she. That's really what leadership is all about. And Ken was a real leader. Now, obviously, as an athlete, he was an outstanding athlete. In the days when the Iowa Hawkeyes were one of the best college teams in the United States of America, he quarterbacked them to a Rose Bowl win and was named the outstanding player in the Rose Bowl that year, and then came up to Winnipeg, played defensive back, and played quarterback. As a player, in those days, the plays weren't sent in from the sidelines. It wasn't you didn't have a thing on your arm with all the plays written down. They'd call one, and then you'd call the play. He called all the plays himself, and that obviously made adjustments with Bud Grant and Joe Zaleski, and he would talk at halftime or whenever and make some adjustments. But Ken ran the game, so from that point of view, he was a smart field general, and he was a real competitor. I think the fact that off the field that he was such a pleasant guy, people wouldn't realize what a fierce competitor he was, and in the nicest way. I mean, he was out there to win the game, and he was going to play as hard as he could. So you wanted to play as hard as you could to make sure that you didn't disappoint Ken. He was just he's a great guy. Just in the common parlance of today, just a great guy. That's someone you really would like to emulate.
Paul, what do you think Ken's legacy is going to be?
I think his legacy is probably the exemplary professional athlete. Certainly the exemplary Blue Bomber athlete. One who played on both sides of the ball, played defense and offense, who conducted himself on the field as a true competitor, and then conducted himself off the field as a great ambassador for the football club, and was a great citizen of Winnipeg. Raised a lovely family, and was kind of an icon as a player, but he was more than a player. He was just an outstanding person, and unpretentious is the best word that I can use to describe Ken. He just was a friendly, smile, shake your hand, pat you on the back, welcoming kind of guy. I have great admiration for him.
That was former Blue Bomber player and assistant general manager Paul Robson. He was remembering his friend, the legendary quarterback Ken Plain, who died this week at the age of 88.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
It's 6:20, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Marcusa. Well, season 4 of the Talking Stick video series is set to premiere this month, featuring on-camera interviews and live performances of new music by Indigenous artists in Manitoba. The first performance was released this past weekend. It showcases Ethan Lyric. This is Messing Things Up Again.
Butterless and talking about women. Polo shirts and men who think I'm their girl. Look into the same eyes. You tell me look too long and be hypnotized. I know it's true. If it happened to me, it'll happen to you. Oh, I guess I'm just messing things up again. I guess I'm just messing things up again. I guess I'm just messing things up again. And you won't have it. Baseball tees and accents from overseas. Pleated shirts and voices that stay unheard. Look into the same eyes. You tell me look too long, you'll be hypnotized. I know it's true. If it happened to me, it'll happen to you. Oh, I guess I'm just messing things up again. I guess I'm just messing things up again. I guess I'm just messing things up again. And you won't have it. Oh, I guess I'm just messing things up again. I guess I'm just messing things up again. I guess I'm just messing things up again. And you won't have it.
That was Messing Things Up Again by Ethan Lyric. 23 minutes after 6 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, back in 2022, in the midst of the pandemic, Ottawa temporarily lifted the ceiling on paid work for international students. The move was meant to allow eligible students to take on as much paid work as they want. Now, most are working more than 20 hours a week, with some working full-time hours or more. But that policy is set to change at the end of April. The Minister of Immigration is now talking about resetting the cap on paid work to about 30 hours a week. For more on what this means, we're joined by Natalia Tola. She's the National Deputy Chairperson with the Canadian Federation of Students. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Pretty good. So what do you think about the government's plans to limit the amount of paid work that international students can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really important to take into account the fact that international students pay almost up to 6 times as much as domestic students. We do not have access to many loans, to many bursaries, to many grants, and again, no housing vouchers. So we are being very much pushed out of the system. And oftentimes, a lot of these students do not want to be working all these hours through regular venues and irregular venues. However, if we are offered so little relief for what student debt is, then oftentimes we have no choice but to work. So again, we vehemently oppose this cap, where we think it's just not going to alleviate any of the issues that, the ministry is concerned with, and it's just going to push for more irregular avenues for working.
So how many of the members in the Canadian Federation of Students are now international students?
Yeah, I would say about 40 to 47%. I would have to check in with my colleagues, but it's a very significant and growing demographic.
Wow. Okay. So how much should they be allowed to work? Like, should it be unlimited hours?
So I think that we very much encourage self-determination for these students. I think a really good way to look at it is, if you would ask any medium to low-income individual how many hours they need to work, the answer would be as many hours as needed. And, this is very much the case as well. We want students to be students. But again, oftentimes they need to work as many hours as can be, because of the affordability crisis. So again, we encourage self-determination because each and every case is so different.
Mm-hmm. And definitely, price of living has gone up. But, if we allow unlimited work for international students, how can the government make sure that, they're really coming as students first and foremost and not, just trying to access paid work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really important to take into account the fact that I do not think that any student, because we all have to be full-time students, we do not have the privilege of being part-time students. I think that any full-time student would not want to balance 6 to 7 courses with 3 jobs. It's simply not feasible, and it's extremely hard to find a balance. So I think this assertion that we're here to find paid labor is simply incorrect. We have no choice but to find paid labor in order to afford our schooling. And I think if the government offered more relief to international students and more funding to post-secondary, they would find that the amount of international students who desperately seek work would be reduced.
Mm-hmm. And of course, being a student takes a lot of work too. What about the argument that, taking on that much paid work could interfere with their studies and their focus on being a student?
Yeah, it absolutely does. That is absolutely the truth. However, international students simply do not have a choice. Their choice is either to work or simply to, find another way of funding. And oftentimes this is really hard. If you look at the scholarships that schools offer to international students, they are very minimal compared to, their tuition, which is ever increasing, ever growing. Again, there's no cap for how much they can raise tuition. And again, we don't have access to any other forms of aid. This is simply a result of the funding that the federal government has allotted to post-secondary, to international students. So does it interfere with their schooling? Absolutely. However, students will do what they have to do to stay afloat. It's a very brave thing to do, but it's coming at great personal cost, as well as, the cost of individuals' mental health.
So just before you go, Natalia, what do you see as a better long-term solution for students in Canada working long hours and still struggling with affordability?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the most important things we want to look into is the fact that post-secondary has been chronically underfunded for decades. If we were able to give more money to post-secondary, to universities, then they wouldn't have to use international students to cover their gaps in their funding. And so tuition wouldn't be ever growing, ever increasing. And that would allow students to come and just be that, just students. Again, I really want to stress the fact that we can't allow the system to create employment barriers just based on status. And last but not least, I think, we really encourage stakeholder partner collaboration. There are so many, front-facing, membership-led student organizations that look at this policy very frequently and, have countless ideas of how we can find better ways. So again, we really encourage collaboration with all these different organizations who also want to be a part of a solution.
Thanks so much for joining us bright and early like this, Natalia.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you have a great day.
You too. That was Natalia Tola. She's National Deputy Chairperson with the Canadian Federation of Students. It's 6:29 and we're coming up on local news time. Right now it's minus 15 degrees at the Forks and we'll be going up to a high of minus 12 today. Tonight going down to a low of minus 23. So a lot chillier than we're used to. And tomorrow a high of minus 12. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, in today for Marcy Marcusa. And sounds like it's still pretty light out there on the roads. If you have any traffic tips, do give us a call. And we're coming up on the local news time with Heather Wells. She's out there in the newsroom, and the CBC News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I am Heather Wells, and it is minus 12. It almost feels new, this cold out there. It's going to be clear, though, this morning. A little bit of sun for you this afternoon as well. A grieving mother of a teen killed in Manitoba on the weekend is speaking out. She believes child welfare authorities ignored her concerns about safety, placing her daughter in a potentially dangerous situation. And she told her story to CBC's Karen Pauls.
She was a firecracker. Beautiful.
Juliet Hastings wants people to remember her daughter Maya's life, not her tragic death. I loved her so much.
Maya's body was found Sunday in a home in Carmen. She lived there with her cousin, 30-year-old Amanda Clearwater, who was found dead earlier that morning in a highway ditch. The bodies of Clearwater's 3 young children were pulled from a burning car not long after. The RCMP accused Clearwater's partner of killing them all.
5 first-degree murder charges against Ryan Manitobans.
Hastings says she was worried when Maya moved in with the couple. Manitobans was on bail and under court-ordered treatment for addictions and mental health.
Something dark was just festering.
Hastings says she took her concerns to the family social worker, but says nobody followed through.
She didn't do a safety placement order, and she didn't do a criminal record check.
Winnipeg CFS deferred questions to the provincial government, which said it would be inappropriate to comment during the investigation. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Hundreds turned out in Winnipeg last night, marching against violence against Indigenous women. Rallies are held across Canada every Valentine's Day in honor of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. This year's march took on added significance in light of the deaths of 2 women and 3 children in Carmen. Alaya McIver is one of the organizers of the march.
It's important to really remember the love from community and really showing the family that there is love across our province. It's important for us as a community to step up, especially in such hard times.
Indigenous women and girls are 4 times more likely than other groups to be victims of violence. The chief of Peguis First Nation has questions about a land flip involving some choice property on Wellington Crescent. A Peguis-controlled company bought the old Shriners Hospital from the province as part of their treaty land entitlement agreement. The agreement makes up for land they're still owed by the Crown. The province sold the 2.8-acre lot for $350,000 to the Peguis-controlled company in 2022. 6 months later, that trust flipped it to a private developer. New Peguis chief Stan Bird is upset about the transaction.
Land is important to our people. Land for our people is not a commodity. Our land is very much tied to our culture, and without that, we don't have an identity, and I believe that that's one of the reasons our people continue to struggle. It's not about money. It's much more than that.
The Peguis Real Estate Trust website says it sold the Wellington property for $2.8 million. The chair of the trust says it was a normal business deal for the benefit of the community. Well, the annual celebration of Manitoba's fur trapping heritage is back in full swing. The 77th annual Northern Manitoba Trappers Festival continues through Sunday in the Pas. Board member Sonny LaValle says the festival brings everyone together from town, the surrounding RM, and nearby Opaskwayak Cree Nation.
Phenomenal what people think about the festival, because they'll come out, no matter who you talk to, I'll come out and help. And it makes everybody feel so good about this week of festival, because the festival is a great event.
Recent warm weather forced the cancellation of the sled dog races, but events like the Fur Queen competition, snow and ice sculpting, and the smoked meat and cured fish contest are scheduled to go on as usual. And it's almost time for a Winnipeg winter party as well. Festival des Voyageurs in St. Boniface begins tomorrow. And it is a win for Winnipeg.
A greasy goal. And there it is for Morgan Barron.
Morgan Barron in the first period on Sportsnet with the only goal of the night. The Jets beating San Jose 1-0. Winnipeg head coach Rick Bowness was asked about that greasy goal, the only one of 39 Winnipeg shots to find the back of the net on a night when the Jets had 84 shot attempts.
That's hockey. Just keep throwing pucks at the net and hope for the best. That's, we lost the game in Philadelphia. That's all they did. They threw 2 pucks to the net and they hit about 3 different things and went in twice. Tonight we got one of those.
This was Jets goalie Connor Hellebuck's 3rd shutout of the season, the 35th of his career. The Jets hit the road now, facing off in Vancouver against the Canucks on Saturday. You can find more news updated throughout your morning. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1 from Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Marcusa. And our show director, Nolan Kaler, joins us now now with the weather and traffic.
Good morning, Emily. Yes, so let's start off in the northern part of the province this morning with an extreme cold warning still in effect for much of the northern parts of the province, except for Churchill, which somehow dodged the extreme cold warning. But do not be fooled. It is still quite chilly with wind chill values around minus 43 this morning up in Churchill. Otherwise, mainly sunny skies for that part of the province today. And you'll see the wind chill values around minus 38 this afternoon. Here in Winnipeg, it's currently minus 15 at the Forks. Wind chill value in around the minus 28 range right now. And a mix of sun and cloud expected for today, and the northwest wind up to 20 kilometers an hour, a high of minus 12. And we'll see partly cloudy skies tonight. The overnight low falling down to minus 23, and that's minus 31 with the wind chill overnight. Mainly sunny skies again tomorrow. Winds out of the southwest and a high of minus 12. But another chilly morning as far as wind chill values go tomorrow. So much the same as what we're seeing this morning. Good morning to you in Brandon. You're looking at a slight chance of flurries this morning, and that is the case for much of southwestern Manitoba. The skies will be clearing this afternoon. A high of minus 13 for you today, minus 18 currently in the Wheat City. Clear skies tonight with winds dying down and the overnight low falling to minus 27. So that's minus 38 overnight in case you were wondering. Again, bundling up if you could. Good morning to you in Thompson. Also quite chilly, not Churchill chilly perhaps, but minus 32 nonetheless. And that is translating to around minus 37 with the wind chill with light winds. Clearing skies though, and you're looking for a high of minus 21 for today. Clear skies for you tonight in Thompson. The overnight low falling to minus 30. Quick look at other conditions across the province. Pilot Mount, currently mainly cloudy, a slight chance of flurries, a high of minus 16, minus 17 in Gimli under a mix of sun and cloud, and minus 16 for the good folks in the Motor City, Steinbach, a mix of sun and cloud for you today. So looking at the traffic conditions now, Emily, because it's a bit colder, we've got a bit more exhaust coming out of those cars, which means that we'll get a bit more freeze on the roads from that exhaust. So that'll be something to watch for as we get into rush hour, but no major issues within the city of Winnipeg to tell you about right now. And looking at Manitoba highways, the only two spots that I'm seeing that could be potential issues, Highway 60 in around the Pas this morning is reporting some reduced visibility and snow-covered sections. And the same is true for Highway 6 as you are heading north out of Gypsumville, tracing that western shore of Lake Winnipeg. If you see anything else out there on the highways or here in the city of Winnipeg, do give us a call on the CBC commuter line to let us know about it. The number to call, 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Nolan.
You bet.
That's our studio director, Nolan Kaler. Well, it's 6:38 now. Time for some business news. Phil DeMont joins us from the CBC Business Report. Good morning.
Hi, Emily.
So Maersk, the shipping giant, says it probably won't return to the Red Sea until maybe this fall. What does that mean for global trade?
Well, it's not good news because Maersk operates about 20% of the world's liner fleet. It abandoned the Red Sea Suez Canal region late last year. That's after those Houthi rebels started targeting ships using that trade route to get goods to Europe. Maersk now says it'll probably keep diverting its ships until well into the second half of the year. The Houthi attacks in response to the growing conflict between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. So experts say maybe 90% of the ships that usually go up the Red Sea are using alternative routes, generally around the tip of Africa. But that change adds something like $1 million in extra costs per trip because they burn more fuel to go that route. That's ignited fears in countries like U.S. and Canada that we might be seeing another round of higher prices for things that we import. Experts say might not be the case, might not be a repeat of what we saw after COVID. Back in 2021, there was an explosion of consumer demand. People had money and all of a sudden they could buy things. So that created all those shipping bottlenecks that we saw and higher prices. This time around, you got slowing economies in the UK, US, Germany, China, and that means less demand for new products, and that'll keep prices down. Longer term, though, these disruptions on global trade, it's unclear. Countries finding new ways to get their products to market. For example, more ships, they're offloading cargo at ports in the Gulf of Oman and then shipping the goods to Israel by train. But some of these geographical diversifications are increasing, not reducing the probability of more trade problems. New report out of the Bank of International Settlements found some of these new trade links between countries, they're actually geographically longer than the traditional ones. And that means they could be subject to more disruptions because they basically just pass more areas where there's geopolitical conflict. So you're kind of increasing the risk of running into a war or a conflict. You're decreasing the risk of just one area being shut off. And experts are not clear whether that's good or bad for trade.
It really gives us insight to where our goods are coming from when you hear that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, technology companies keep cutting jobs. How long will that trend continue?
Yeah, it looks to be long term. The latest player in this is Cisco. The computer networking giant wants to cut 5% of its workforce, 4,200 jobs. Had good earnings. They beat expectations out this week, but company said customers being more cautious with their cash. Cisco joins a growing list of tech companies that have been reducing staff. You've got SAP, 8,000 jobs, eBay, 1,000 jobs, Microsoft, 1,900 jobs. So far in the past year, or so far this year, high-tech companies have dumped something like 35,000 workers worldwide, and we're not even into March yet. Two reasons. When a couple of years ago, they were expanding to capture revenue. Revenues were soaring, so they hired people to get that money. Now with spending slowing, technology firms discovering they can do more with less. Other trend is actually getting into artificial intelligence. Companies aren't interested in expanding their operations to get into AI. Instead, they're shifting money out of slower growth areas in their company and moving it into this area. But what that means is the slower growth area, you're losing your job. Technology index of the NASDAQ up 60% since last spring. Part of that's because investors like the fact that they're lowering costs. So I think that's going to continue.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we just marked Valentine's Day, and there's a new app where you can find romance. What makes this one different than all the others already out there?
Yeah, it matches you up according to your financial worthiness.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. It's not your hotness quotient anymore that gets you the next stage. It's your credit score. I know. The Neon Money Club, though, they greenlit this baby this week in time for Valentine's Day. And their thinking is if you have a good financial fit, it's a better indicator of a lasting, longer-term relationship than washboard abs. But to play on score, that's the site's name. You need a reading of 675 or above. And Neon isn't wrong when they're thinking. One survey I saw said money problems were the cause of 4 out of every 10 divorces. Having the same credit score in the good range, because that's what 675 is, probably matches up people in similar financial circumstances. Can eliminate some of the gold digging that can occur on dating sites. I had a single female friend, and she was a president of her own company, and she said she had to make sure some guy who lost a bunch of money in a divorce wasn't just trying to use her as a bank account by dating her. It doesn't eliminate that problem, but probably gets rid of some of the obvious deadbeats.
The joys of online dating, huh?
Really?
So what's happening in the market so far, Phil?
Right now, the UK is in a technical recession, but that market is up slightly. Germany and France up more than 0.5%. Japan's in a recession, but the Nikkei hit the highest level since 1990. It's up 1.25%. Oil down 58 cents, $76.03 U.S. a barrel, and the Canadian dollar. It's up slightly, trading at 73.87 cents U.S.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Emily.
That was Phil DeMont with the CBC Business News. Good morning. It's 6:44, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg and worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass. So, do any of these titles mean anything to you? The Littlest Hobo, Wojak, The King of Kensington? Well, they're all classic Canadian TV shows from the 60s and 70s, some of which might be very hard to find these days. That has Jennifer Vanderberg concerned that we're in danger of losing a lot of the cultural memory associated with shows like that. She's an associate professor in the Department of English Language and Literature at St. Mary's University, and she teaches courses on film, television, and media. She's also the author of What Television Remembers. Here's Vanderberg on the importance of preserving retro Canadian TV.
Everyone that he meets calls him King of Kensington.
How you doing, King?
Take
These shows are incredible artworks, but they're also incredible artifacts of cultural ways of thinking, ways that we, expressed ourselves, or, issues that we were interested in at a moment in time. They remember the way that things looked, they remember the way that things sounded, but also the way that we thought. It's very difficult to access these things. A lot of them are very well preserved in archives, but because of lapsed licensing agreements and issues with copyright, we don't have access to these shows. In the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, the reason why it was great to work in television is basically the reason why we're having these difficulties today. Television, when it was produced in a union environment, television was produced for a certain broadcast window. So a broadcaster could broadcast a show a certain number of times or for a period of time. And after that, rights would have to be renegotiated in order to do that again. So a lot of the material from the 60s, 70s, 80s into the 90s has lapsed. And to show it again in a public setting, we'd have to go back and we'd have to, renegotiate all of those agreements all over again. It's an extremely difficult process. It would take a lot of money. It would take a lot of labor. And there just hasn't been the effort to do that. And there's a lot of discourse about how important television is to the nation, to national identity, to cultural identity. But ironically, the actual programs that appeared on television that were made in the public interest and with public money, the public can't access.
Maybe tomorrow I'll want to settle down. Until tomorrow
Littlest Hobo is actually playing again. I was really struck by, with a show like Wojak, for example, that was on incredible show about a Toronto coroner based on a real person from, I think it was 66 to 68. Every episode is about, a social concern, a hot topic at the time. And just seeing, first of all, the show is gorgeous. It's shot in sort of a cinema verite style with a, handheld camera. And it's beautiful shots of Toronto exteriors at a moment in time. So it's absolutely gorgeous aesthetically. But to see in every episode, what people were concerned about. I think it's really interesting, reflections on what was wrong with the country at the time that needed to be fixed, and also to see this optimism in what social policy can do. I think we've kind of lost that hope, in social policy being able to take care of us. And that's something that I really trace through the different decades of these shows. These are incredible treasures for people who are interested, but also, historians, cultural theorists. There's lots to be learned from these shows.
Great to hear all those theme songs from the past. Jennifer Vanderberg is an associate professor in the Department of English Language and Literature at St. Mary's University, and she's the author of What Television Remembers.
CBC Sports is your source for sports coverage and insights you won't find anywhere else. Get the athlete's real story on the Player's Own Voice podcast, hosted by Anastasia Busis. Find Player's Own Voice on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. And whether you're a hardcore fan or just looking to hold your own in the conversation, the Buzzer newsletter helps make you smarter about sports. Subscribe today at cbcsports.ca/thebuzzer.
Some people say the end is near, and some say that it's already here.
Wildfires across Canada are burning hotter and faster than ever. I'm Adrienne Lamb, host of the podcast World on Fire. In our latest episode, we'll meet the reporters who run towards the danger and hear their stories of harrowing escapes and resilient communities. That's World on Fire on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning. It's coming up on 10 minutes before 7 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Quick look at the forecast now for Winnipeg today. A mix of sun and cloud and breezy with a high of -12. Yes, a little colder than we've been getting used to. Tonight, partly cloudy, becoming clear overnight. Breeze becoming light around midnight with a low of -23. Tomorrow, mainly sunny, breezy with a high of -12. And right now, it Looks like we are going to our interview with Rami Curie. Rafah is normally a city of 250,000 people in southern Gaza, but since Israel ordered civilians to evacuate south, it's swelled to an estimated 1.5 million. With Israel now signaling its intention of mounting a ground offensive, a senior United Nations official is warning that such an invasion could, quote, lead to a slaughter. For more on this story, we've reached Rami Curie. He's the distinguished public policy fellow at the American University of Beirut. Good morning, Rami.
Hey, good morning, Emily.
So before we get to the situation in Rafah, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are now calling for an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages in Gaza. What's your reaction to this joint statement?
I think it's very positive, but it is a statement. Rhetoric is the first step to action. But it's great to have people like countries like Canada, Australia, and others move back towards regaining their international status as respected, independent, and righteous, justice-based actors. In recent years, they've tacked more towards the United States and Israel, and this has isolated them a bit. And now I think this is a step to get back to where Canada always was and should be. But I think it needs to be followed up with actions. So let's see what happens.
So how would you describe the situation right now in Rafah, where the majority of Palestinians in Gaza are now sheltering?
Well, it's a total, inhumanity. And literally the fundamental requirements of biological life are difficult to access there for almost all the people: water, food, medicine, shelter, safe transport, whatever. The Israelis are continuing what they started 4 months ago, which is to not just defeat Hamas as they're trying to do, which is not clear if it's going to happen or not, and retrieve their hostages through military force, which also is not clear. But they are trying also to make Gaza uninhabitable. They want the Palestinians out of there. They want to drive them out of Gaza into the Sinai or somewhere else so that they can retake Gaza and put some Israeli settlers there. The government officials have been saying this and others. So this is a terrible situation, both at the level of the inhumanity of the actions, but also at the passive way the international community is just watching this live on TV without doing anything about it.
So what can you tell us about the ceasefire talks that are underway now?
These are really important, probably the most important thing right now, because this is the second phase. They had a ceasefire a couple of months ago it lasted like 3, 4, 6, 8 days, extended a few times. But what they're trying to do now is have a longer ceasefire, maybe around between 4 and 8 weeks, release more Israeli hostages in Gaza, and release more Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, large numbers on both sides. If this happens, probably in a phased way, it would set the stage for maybe a permanent ceasefire and allowing Gaza to rebuild somehow, which is a huge challenge, but also to shift the center of gravity of this conflict from recurring savage military confrontations by both sides, shift it towards a political negotiation. And this is hard, but essential. Otherwise, we're going to go through this again and again, and nobody wants that.
And what other shifts do you think are important to note?
I think the fact that the International Court of Justice ruled about 2 weeks ago that Israel is plausibly conducting a genocidal campaign is really important. I mean, the International Court of Justice is pretty serious stuff, and they require that all countries and people and organizations around the world comply with its demand that people stop assisting the genocide if they're assisting it. So I'm looking for more litigation in national courts around the world that would require companies or countries to stop sending, say, military hardware to Israel, because this is a requirement. It's not a recommendation. It's a requirement by international law from the International Court of Justice. So this is something that I'm looking at. It's starting to happen. We've had cases in the Netherlands. Spain is raising a case. Others are doing similar things like that. So this could snowball into an international peaceful legal process to pressure Israel to stop its genocidal act and, again, push both sides towards a political negotiation.
And what else will you be watching for in the coming days, Rami?
I think what I'll be watching for is action at the political and economic level. So there's a lot of things that people can do all over the world other than just signing petitions and things like that. So we're seeing, for instance, in the U.S. Congress, there's probably now around 90 or 100 members of Congress who would sign up for a ceasefire resolution. A year ago, that would have been maybe 5 members of Congress. But there's shifts starting to take place within countries around the world, especially the powerful ones, that are trying to line up a more even-handed position rather than to be fully behind whatever Israel wants to do. Because we've seen what that's led to. It's led to this barbaric campaign by Israel, inhuman campaign, which Rafah now symbolizes. So I'm looking for more political action. I'm seeing some changes in the media coverage, which is important around the world. The media is becoming much more fair to look at the positions of both sides, which it didn't used to do very much. It was almost totally pro-Israeli. So we're starting to see changes for the better, and this will be for the well-being of both Israel and Palestine in the future if it continues.
Thanks so much for joining us this morning, Rami.
Thanks, Emily. Good luck.
Rami Khouri is a distinguished public policy fellow at the American University of Beirut. It is now 6:56, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. A grieving mother of a teen killed in Carmen on Sunday is speaking out. She believes child welfare authorities ignored her concerns about safety, placing her daughter in a potentially dangerous situation. We're going to hear more from her coming up. And the deaths in Carmen of the 2 women and 3 children added extra significance to last night's Valentine's Day march. Hundreds turned out in Winnipeg in honor of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. We'll take you to that march in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
And now in studio is Nolan Kaler with a look at the traffic.
Yes, one quick update to let folks know about King Edward at Logan. There's a collision blocking the southbound curb lane there, as well as all westbound lanes. So that's going to be something to watch out for, especially as we start seeing people start to drive into the downtown area from the north part of the city. If you see anything else out there on your commute this morning, do give us a call on the CBC commuter line. Happy to hear any information that you might share. The number is 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Nolan.
Of course.
That's CBC's Nolan Kaler. Well, still to come on the show, we're going to speak with the mayor about police and growing service calls for mental health. We'll also talk about Winnipeg's draft budget as well. A Two-Spirit beadwork artist shares with us about how they connect with others through beadwork. We'll find out more about that. And ahead of a show here in Winnipeg, legendary comedian Ron James tells us how he's learned to make fun of his mortality, a fractious political environment, and the everyday moments that make life absurd. That's going to come up right after World Report, which is up next. Right now it is minus 15 at the Forks. We're going up to a high today of minus 12 and going down to a low of minus 23 tonight. So make sure you got all that extra warm winter gear ready to go. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. World Report is up next.
Breslin was followed by people with clipboards taking notes. She didn't find out until years later that she was part of a study. Susanna Breslin on a childhood spent as a human lab rat, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Canada is experiencing a sharp increase in reports of online sextortion. The National Tip Line has seen a 150% increase over the past 6 months. And a pattern is emerging from those reports. People overseas are blackmailing teenage boys. Last week, we told you about a boy in Vancouver who felt so desperate he took his own life. Now it has happened again, this time in New Brunswick. The CBC's Alexander Silberman spoke to a young victim's mother.
Stéphanie Thériault remembers her son William Doiron as a ball of energy. She says he was a happy 16-year-old with a big circle of friends in Saint-Léolin, a village on New Brunswick's Acadian Peninsula, until he started sending messages on Snapchat to who he thought was a young woman. In October of 2022, William took his own life. His family later learned he was the victim of a global sextortion scheme where he was convinced to send explicit images, then threatened with the pictures going public if he didn't pay the ransom. Police eventually traced the messages back to an organized criminal network in West Africa. They convince you your life is over if you don't pay, his mother says. But if you pay, they just ask for more money. William's story is part of a rise in financially motivated sextortion scams, specifically targeting young males. The spike in cases is being noticed at cybertip.ca, Canada's national tip line for online child exploitation.
These extorter groups are relentless.
Catherine Tabak is senior manager with the tip line. She says parents should talk to their kids about the risks, but more action is needed.
We really need platforms to start stepping up. They are purposely drawing kids onto their platforms and aren't really doing much to help protect them.
Stéphanie Thériault says she hopes speaking out will help prevent similar tragedies in the future. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Moncton.
Israel Defense Forces are confirming they have entered a hospital in southern Gaza.
The Israel army now is almost about to enter the hospital.
Eyewitness video shows the moment troops entered Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. The IDF says they are there to search for the remains of hostages taken by Hamas, and they have arrested people. The leaders of Canada, New Zealand, and Australia are again for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. They are released, and they have released a joint statement. It says a ground operation farther south in Rafah could be catastrophic. Abby Dawson has that story.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called for peace in the region before the joint statement was issued.
We need to see the release of hostages. We need to see a sustainable ceasefire.
Canada, Australia, and New Zealand pressing for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as concern mounts over an Israeli ground offensive into Rafah. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong had words for Benjamin Netanyahu's government.
Our message to Israel is listen to the world. Do not go down this path.
The three nations referred to the International Court of Justice's binding measures in their statement, saying Israel must ensure the delivery of humanitarian aid and protect civilians. There are about 1.4 million Palestinians sheltering in Rafah, in an area the size of London's Heathrow Airport.
What we do see now is the willful destruction of civilians.
Zane Dangor is the Director General of South Africa's Department of International Relations and Cooperation, which brought the case of genocide against Israel to the ICJ last month.
We hope that the court assesses the dangers and that orders the Israeli army not to engage in any form of armed attack in the Rafah area.
He acknowledges the ICJ cannot enforce its measures, but hopes Israel's friends, including the United States and United Kingdom, will push Netanyahu to follow international law. The Israeli Prime Minister has repeatedly said destroying Hamas is a main priority and has shown no indication of halting the military offensive. His coalition government has yet to respond to this joint statement. Abby Dawson, CBC News, London.
Defense Minister Bill Blair says Canadian forces serving with NATO will be getting new weapons.
We are acquiring the RBS-70NG air defense system through an investment of approximately $227 million with Saab. Once operational, this air defense system will defend our troops against aerial threats, including fixed-wing aircraft, helicopters, and drones, and it will strengthen the defense capability of the battle group as a whole.
Canada's military has been without a dedicated air defense system for more than a dozen years. Blair also announced Canada will be acquiring a counter-drone system as well as anti-tank weapons. All of the equipment will be deployed with the Canadian-led NATO brigade in Latvia. In downtown Winnipeg, hundreds of people marched last night to remember 5 people killed in rural Manitoba over the weekend. 30-year-old Amanda Clearwater was killed along with her 3 young children and her 17-year-old niece, Maya Grattan. The CBC's Karen Pauls spoke to Grattan's mother. A warning, some of what you will hear is disturbing.
Someone's going to pay for taking my baby away from me when this could have been avoided.
Juliet Hastings still feels like she's living a nightmare, but she wants people to remember her daughter Maya's life, not her tragic death.
She was a firecracker. Beautiful.
Maya's body was found Sunday in a home in a small rural Manitoba community. She lived there with her cousin, 30-year-old Amanda Clearwater, who was found dead earlier that morning in a highway ditch. The bodies of Clearwater's 3 young children were pulled from a burning car not long after. The RCMP accused Clearwater's partner of killing them all.
5 first-degree murder charges against Ryan Manakisik.
Hastings says she was worried about Manakisik, who was on bail and under court-ordered treatment for addictions and mental health.
Something dark was just festering, and I just didn't want my daughter to be caught in the crossfire.
Hastings says she took her concerns to the family social worker at Child and Family Services, but says nobody followed through.
She didn't do a safety placement order, and she didn't do a criminal record check.
Winnipeg CFS deferred questions to the provincial government, which said it would be inappropriate to comment during the investigation.
I should have fought harder.
In the midst of unspeakable pain, Hastings says her community and her faith is helping her cope.
I loved her so much.
Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Donald Trump will appear in a Manhattan court again this morning, this time in the criminal case over his alleged hush money payments to an adult film star. The CBC's Chris Reyes is following this story for us in New York. She is at the courthouse. Chris, what is at stake for the Republican frontrunner here?
Good morning, Marcia. Well, the significance of this case is that it could be the first of 4 criminal cases against Donald Trump to go to trial. We were here back in April for that historic moment when Donald Trump appeared in court, making him the first president to be indicted on criminal charges in this country. As you mentioned, these charges are in connection to allegations that he falsified business records, hiding from voters that he made hush money payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels via his fixer, Michael Cohen, who is expected to be the star witness in this case. A New York judge will decide today on whether this case will go to trial and when. Trump's lawyers, no surprise here, have tried to get this case dismissed. That doesn't look like it's going to happen, Marcia. Judge Juan Manuel Merchan will decide on some pre-trial issues today and will confirm if this case will go to trial March 25. There's quite a big police presence around the courthouse right now, and that's because Trump is expected to attend this hearing this morning.
This is not Trump's only case this week. What else does he have going on?
It is not. He has a jam-packed court calendar, Marcia. Today, another key hearing in Georgia for Trump's election interference case. His lawyers there are trying to disqualify prosecutors because of an alleged romantic relationship. The district attorney, Fannie Willis, has admitted to having a personal relationship with one of the prosecutors. Here in New York, we're also awaiting another ruling from Judge Engeron tomorrow on a civil case against the Trump Organization, which could cost them $370 million. And then on top of that, there's, of course, the Supreme Court hearing where they'll be deciding on Trump's immunity claim against charges of election interference stemming from the 2020 presidential election and the January 6th attack on the Capitol that followed. So very busy is an understatement.
Thank you, Chris. That is the CBC's Chris Reyes reporting from New York. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, and worldwide on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Here's what's coming up on the show. Modest increases in many areas, less money for roads, and no cash for the Arlington Bridge. We'll ask Mayor Scott Gillingham about budget decisions. That's after the 7:30 news. We caught up with a Two-Spirit beadwork artist at Eagle Urban Transition Center and spoke about the connection to culture through beading. But first, ahead of his show here in Winnipeg, we'll hear how comedian Ron James walks the fine line between poignant political commentary and good old-fashioned observational comedy. All that and more still to come on Information Radio. 11 minutes after 7 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the chief of Peguis First Nation has questions about a land flip involving a choice piece of property on Wellington Crescent. In 2022, a Peguis-controlled company bought the old Shriners Hospital from the province as part of their treaty land entitlement agreement. 6 months later, the trust flipped it to a private developer. The new chief is upset about that transaction. We're going to hear more from him. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be in Winnipeg later today with the Premier, announcing a health bilateral agreement, the Working Together and Aging with Dignity agreements, the funding to help Manitoba lower some wait times in healthcare. We'll hear about that as well in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. And from right here in the studio, here's Nolan Kaler with a look at the weather and traffic.
Good morning. A bit more of what we can expect for February, I think, out there this morning.
Real Winnipeg weather now?
Well, we're getting there. It still doesn't really feel like that Winnipeg winter quite yet,
no.
Does it? On the whole, I should say. Definitely more so here in Winnipeg today. Currently sitting at minus 15 degrees at the Forks and looking for a high of minus 12. A mix of sun and cloud today with the wind chill that'll feel like minus 20 a little bit later on this afternoon. Currently, though, feels like minus 28 out there. Good morning to our friends in Brandon. You've risen a couple of degrees since the start of the show. Good for you. Now at minus 16. Mainly cloudy and a slight chance of some flurries as well. That's what we can expect for much of southwestern Manitoba this morning. A high of minus 13 for the Wheat City. Feels like minus 27 out there with the wind chill. And to our friends up in Churchill, boy, that is a bit more we expect from Churchill. Minus 31 this morning, minus 42 with the wind chill. There is actually an extreme cold warning in effect for the northwestern corner of the province and around the Lac Brochet area, all the way down to Leaf Rapids. And that means that we've got some very extreme wind chill values, and Churchill just squeaking in under where that threshold is, but still very chilly. Mainly sunny, though, today, and a high of minus 27. We'll see the wind chill improve. I say improve in big air quotes here, to minus 38 a little bit later on today. Over to the commute here in the city of Winnipeg, the collision that I told you about just ahead of World Report at 7 o'clock, that was at King, Edward, and Logan. That has now been cleared out of the way, so traffic should be moving smoothly through that area in a little bit. You just have to wait perhaps a little while longer for those southbound delays to clear as you're coming into the downtown. Also watching highway visibility and potential snow-covered sections on highways 60 and around the Pas this morning, and Highway 6 as you're making your way north out of Gypsumville. If you see anything else out there on your commute across the province this morning, give us a call on the CBC commuter line. The number is 204-788-3093.
Coming up on 7:15, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, comedian Ron James may be a proud Cape Bretoner, but Winnipeg has a special place in his heart. He spent a lot of time here in his 25-year career, and he'll be back to perform at Club Regent Casino tomorrow night. Here's some of Ron's comedy from 16 years ago. This one's a rant on computers.
The technological tsunami that swept across the Western world, huh? Seems like yesterday I was playing Pac-Man. Suddenly I'm sitting in front of a blacked out Macintosh LC520 with a RAM jam. The screen's gone black. And I didn't save it. I don't listen to that voice in your head that says, oh, fix it yourself. Because 30 seconds into that owner's manual, you'll be swearing like a Tourette's victim locked out of the quilting bee. And you can't kick the bugger either because it's $5,000.
That was Ron James. CBC's Corey Funk spoke with him about how his comedy's changed over the years and the role Rumors Comedy Club played early in his career.
Every 6 months for 5 years, I was up there.
Really?
And oh yeah. In fact, I lauded Winnipeg a great deal in my book. I wrote a book during COVID called All Over the Map that became a bestseller. And I shot my 4th CBC special at the Pantages, and I've got a lot of good things to say about the Peg. And I'm not just pandering. You know, I used to run in those days down by the Forks, and no matter what the temperature was, it was always sunny. And I mean, despite being in a place where thoughts freeze, right, where there's some Arctic blitzkrieg of a wind chill rattling down from the flatlands straight from a Norse demon's lair, it is a remarkable place. You know, I'll never forget the time I was down at the Forks, and it was just a savage day. I had to get out of the hotel for a walk, you know, and so I was hoofing it. Nobody was out, but this little old lady was feeding the squirrels, and I must have been about minus 37. And I said to her, do you feed the squirrels every day, madam? And she looked at me and she said, no, only when it's warm. So you have to tip your hat to that resilient spirit.
I know, Winnipeg's changed a lot, obviously, over the years since you've been performing here. But I'm curious how you've changed. Like, when you look back, say, like those early days at Rumors, how is your comedy different from then?
With the 9 specials for the CBC, I always structured them thematically. And then I had the good fortune, once the series was picked up, to write with Scott Montgomery, Paul Pogue, and Pete Zedlacker. I remember Scott saying, Ron, you've been in the game long enough to say what you want. And I took a great deal of inspiration from that. And so you always have to be cautious in a country of 37 million people, though, how you're going to chart your course in what has become a very fractured political minefield and a sensitive minefield. But to quote the great Billy Connolly, what's the intention of the joke? And my intention has always been to move the world forward to the right side of history, to be progressive, and not to play to the most common denominator. So I think I take more chances these days. I'm certainly not as frenetic. That's one of the great things about age, is it slowed you down. I was thinking the other day that, you know, when I first started touring, I'd wrap up a show at the end of the night with a couple of pints and a drink of scotch, and now I have a bottle of Gatorade and a couple of Tylenol. So that's changed. I mean, you know, but as you get older, the body might break down, but your soul gets stronger. And, you know, I care about the world. I care about my country. And I care about preserving sanity. I mean, God knows what we're sleepwalking into with the increasing ferocity of that orange mutant south of the border, whose only vision is really his own reflection. And so I think big issues have to be addressed, as well as day-to-day issues. Growing up, playing house league hockey, relatable things, the nation. Then, you have to be an equal opportunity offender in Canada when it comes to politics. So I'll hit all parties, just, comfortably, I suppose, so that you don't alienate aspects of the room. And I've always been cautious. People say, yeah, you can say anything in comedy. Sure, as long as you don't lose the room. I'm not as gratuitous with the profanity I expect as I was when I was younger. I'll talk about midlife. I also deal with subjects about mortality, and because at this age, I find that I'm losing friends. I'm going to far too many celebrations of life. And so I've been particularly conscious since COVID to make the moments matter.
As you get older, is it harder to find things funny? Like you said, there's a lot of darker kind of things going on in your life. Or is it easier to make light of the darker things that you see?
Well, I take a page from my 92-year-old mother, who was really funny. And she said, no, you got to laugh or you cry all the time. And I mean, it's not darker. I mean, it's sobering. The situation in the Middle East is dark. Ukraine is dark. The function of day-to-day living is a challenge. And I think, baby boomers who thought we were bulletproof our whole life are just having to deal with, the big issue that everybody had to deal with since time immemorial. And I think we're conscious of things. That's basically most of my audience are boomers. And I had a gig a while ago and I looked down in the audience and it was all, bald heads and white hair. And I said, boy, this feels like my first gig at the home, right? Because, we're basically 15 or 20 years. The bulk of the baby boom is just 20 years away from roaming the home in our Led Zeppelin onesies, just a sing-along away from taking a stairway to heaven. And for the pure satisfaction of the work, for me, that's what it's always been about. It's been about seeing people laugh. As I said earlier, processing the daily trauma of our daily march through life's bright fury in the language of laughs. And that's the satisfaction that I take from it.
On a more serious note than we're used to, that's comedian Ron James speaking with CBC's Corey Funk. And Ron James is performing at Club Regent Casino tomorrow night at 8. And guess what? We've got a pair of tickets to give away. Just email us at win@cbc.ca. win@cbc.ca with the subject line Ron James. And speaking of contests, Canada Reads is coming up quick. It's only a few weeks away. Every year, 5 high-profile Canadians each select the one book they think all of Canada needs to read. Miriam Najo is a fashion content creator and a model, and she's championing the book Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune.
Meet Me at the Lake carries us forward because it provides a blueprint for how to do that. I love that it gives us an opportunity to step into their world while also being able to relate to our own. Much like the characters, we don't know how our lives are going to turn out. And much like the characters, many of our best laid plans fall short, fall flat, or aren't realized at all. But as we watch the characters navigate through their lives and eventually come to their happily ever after through, showing grace, having compassion, being selfless, making sacrifices, chasing your heart and listening to your heart, we can leave with a sense of empowerment and feel inspired and influenced by the way they overcome their lives. And we can take that, apply that to our own lives, and ultimately use it as a roadmap for how to move forward.
That was champion Miriam Anja discussing Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. That's the book she'll be championing on Canada Reads 2024. The debates take place March 4th to the 7th. And for more on all 5 of the Canada Reads contenders, go to cbcbooks.ca.
Jarrett Martineau hosts Reclaimed,
In an hour, you could hear everything from powwow music to like a soft acoustic ballad to an electronic record to like a dub track, all in the same hour from an Indigenous artist from any part of the world. Eclecticism is an overused word, obviously, but I think the sheer diversity that gets represented on the show is something that's totally unique.
Reclaimed with Jarrett Martineau. Available now on CBC Listen.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. It's minus 15 right now at the Forks in Winnipeg, and it's going to go up to a high of minus 12. Kind of breezy today with a mix of sun and cloud. Partly cloudy tonight, becoming clear overnight with a low of minus 23, and mainly sunny tomorrow, breezy around noon with a high of minus 12. 25 minutes after 7 o'clock, time for some sport news. Scott Regier joins us from the CBC Sports Desk. Good morning, Scott.
Hey there, Emily.
So how did things go for the Jets last night? They were taking on the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah, and I mean, a little lucky. They got the win, which is all that counts, of course, Emily. It came on a fluky goal from Morgan Barron. It bounced off the puck, off of Barron's glove before it found the back of the San Jose net. Now, Connor Hellebuck on the other side of the rink, once again, was outstanding in getting his third shutout of the season, although that clean sheet might not have happened had it not been for Mark Scheifele, who, after Hellebuck was caught out of position at one point, slid in behind his keeper and stopped a shot by swatting the puck out of harm's way.
A lot of mini sticks. That was exactly what it was. Drop your stick and just try to make a save, honestly. Like, I just, Bucky, I knew Bucky didn't really know where he was, and I was on the wrong side of it, and just honestly try to get any limb on it whatsoever. It kind of hit me first and then kind of came over, and then I got it with my hand, so just a great save. Bucky owes me one.
I'm not going to play that Mark Scheifele clip for my two youngest sons, Emily. And the reason for that is they play mini sticks all the time in the basement. They're destroying our floors and our walls. And if we listen to Scheifele, it's going to help get you an NHL career playing mini sticks. So anyway, with that win, they only had the one goal, and that will not quiet chatter about the lack of offensive punch the Jets have displayed in recent past. In the past month, actually, Winnipeg's tied with the Connor Bedardless Chicago team for the fewest goals in the entire league. So, and it's not going to get much easier because they play Vancouver, who's atop the NHL standings in the next game on Saturday. So hopefully they'll start scoring a bit more.
Mm-hmm. So shifting over to football, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers general manager Kyle Walters spoke to the media yesterday. What did he have to say following the opening of free agency?
Well, they're largely done when it comes to signing big-name free agents anyway. He says don't expect anything along those lines. With the signings of Brady Oliveira, Dalton Schoen, Chris Streveler, among others, Walter says the team doesn't have any more room.
We just don't have any money. I mean, the spots that are available are going to be for training camp battles, for young players, for first-year players. If somebody, wants to come in on a minimal contract, we might kind of kick the tires on that. But any sort of high-name signing, you won't see us doing. We're comfortable with the way the roster is right now in regards to setting up for where the battles are going to be in training camp.
So Walters also emphasized, Emily, that the team is bringing back 18 of 24 starters from last year's Grey Cup, and that the team will be in position to get back to the championship game the way things are right now. So we'll have to wait and see. Week 1 of the Bombers season goes June 6th, a rematch of the Grey Cup against those Alouettes.
Why mess with success, right?
Yeah.
So let's finish with basketball and an emotional return to Toronto for a former Raptor.
Yeah, as Pascal Siakam, Emily, returned to TO and had 23 points for his new team, Indiana, in what ended a narrow win for the Pacers over Toronto. Siakam was excellent. He was all over the floor. He had 7 assists and 5 rebounds as well. He spent the first 8 years of his pro career in Toronto and, of course, was a massive part of that 2019 championship team.
I came here as a young kid. I remember going to the store. They didn't have my jersey in there. Nobody really knew what to expect from me. And for me to come in here and, after 8 years, just to see the reception, people being so genuinely just happy for me. I got so many messages from people, just genuine love. And to me, that means everything. To see that whole section with my jerseys, that almost got me right there because I couldn't really never dreamed of that.
If you were to ask Raptors fans, Emily, who the most popular player in team history is, a lot of folks would say Vince Carter, and many more would say Kyle Lowry. But there is a segment of the Raptors faithful that would say, without a breath, it's Spicy P. It's Pascal Siakam, because that smile lights up an arena. And to see Section 143 at Scotiabank Arena last night, 43 is Siakam's number, of course. Every single person in every seat was wearing one of his jerseys, and most of them holding up signs to boot. So he was loved, and we'll see whether he's going to continue to win against the Raptors. It's another story, but great to see Spicy P back.
Spicy P, I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
You bet.
That's Scott Regehr from the CBC Sports Desk. Well, still to come, we'll speak with the mayor about police and growing service calls for mental health. We'll also talk about Winnipeg's draft budget. The CBC News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's minus 15 in downtown Winnipeg. Clear with a definite crispness in the air this morning. We'll have a mix of sun and clouds today. A high of minus 12 with a risk of frostbite this afternoon. We are hearing from the mother of a 17-year-old young woman killed Sunday in Carman. Maya Grattan's body was found in a home where she lived with her cousin, Amanda Clearwater, Clearwater's partner, Ryan Manakisek, and their 3 young children. RCMP have charged Manakisek with first-degree murder in their deaths. Juliet Hastings believes child welfare authorities ignored her concerns about safety, placing her daughter in a potentially dangerous situation. Hastings says she was worried when Maya moved in with the couple. At the time, Manakisek was on bail under court-ordered treatment for addictions and mental health. Hastings says she took her concerns to the family's social worker at Child and Family Services, but says no one followed through.
They didn't do any safety checks. They didn't do any criminal record checks. They just took their word. The system didn't work at all. They didn't do their job. They just said, okay, she's good, let's go.
Winnipeg CFS won't comment on Hastings' allegations, deferring questions to the provincial government. A spokesperson says it would be inappropriate to comment during the criminal investigation. While taking to the streets and calling for change. Hundreds marching in Winnipeg in the annual Valentine's March in remembrance of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. This year's rally just days after the 2 women and 3 children were found dead in southern Manitoba. Organizers provided people with care packages and healing sessions to ease participants of the burdens they carry. Alea McIver helped coordinate the march.
It's unfortunate that we're still marching, and really, with very minimal steps into change. We really need drastic steps in action to really implement what community change looks like.
The first Women's Memorial March was held 32 years ago. 2 years ago, Peguis First Nation acquired some of the most desirable residential land in Winnipeg on Wellington Crescent. Now, the new chief of Peguis wants to know why that land was flipped to a private developer. CBC's Bartley Kivas reports.
In 2022, the province of Manitoba sold 2.8 acres on Wellington Crescent to a numbered company controlled by Peguis First Nation. The sale price was $350,000. The province says the sale was part of the treaty land entitlement process, a process intended to compensate First Nations that never received all the land they were promised under treaties. Peguis didn't incorporate the Wellington Crescent property into its reserve lands. It sold it to a private developer 7 months later. Stan Bird was elected chief of Peguis after that sale.
Land for our people is not a commodity. Our land is very much tied to our culture, and without that, we don't have an identity.
The Peguis First Nation Real Estate Trust says on its website it flipped the land for $2.8 million. Trustee Greg Stevenson said he doesn't understand why Chief Bird is upset.
It's just a normal business deal, right? There's nothing that's different from any other business deal.
CBC News spoke to a lawyer with expertise in treaty land entitlement. He says there's nothing preventing First Nations from flipping land. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be in Winnipeg later today announcing 2 healthcare bilateral agreements. One is the Working Together Agreement worth $1.2 billion over 10 years. The other is called Aging with Dignity. The funding will be used to help Manitoba lower wait times, in part to help it reach its commitment to hire 400 doctors, 200 paramedics, and 100 healthcare workers. The announcement with Trudeau and Premier Rob Canoe is expected at 12:30 this afternoon. Party time in the Paw. The 77th annual Northern Manitoba Trappers Festival is kicked off for another year. Board member Sonny LaValle says it's a way of preserving the history of life in the North, and it's been embraced by everyone in the area.
You go around town during this week and you'll see it. Everyone's so happy about what's going on. Everybody forgets about everything. Everyone are friends. It just blows up the whole town, both the OCN, the town, the R.M.McKelsey. People are just happy for this week, and it's too bad it couldn't happen 52 weeks a year.
The festival runs until Sunday. Another winter party as Festival de Voyageurs in St. Boniface begins tomorrow. The Winnipeg Jets notch another win.
Shot on net, and it's in the net! The Jets score!
Morgan Barron in the first period on Sportsnet as the Jets take the teeth out of the Sharks, beating San Jose 1-0. It was Connor Hellebuck's 3rd shutout of the season and the 35th of his career. Head coach Rick Bowness.
He had some timely saves. There were some early in the third there. They had a couple of really good chances, so he stopped. In the second period, their chances weren't very many, but they came in like little bunches there in a hurry, and he made the big save. So, he did his job.
And Hellebuck was helped on one save by Mark Scheifele, who jumped into the net to sweep the puck away. Winnipeg is now on the road playing in Vancouver on Saturday. You can find more news updated throughout your morning. Head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Sounds like it was an exciting game.
It was okay. I mean, you hoped with all those shots. They had 84 shot attempts, but only one went in.
Oh, my gosh. Wow. Thanks so much, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass. And joining us now is our show director, Nolan Kaler, with a look at the weather and traffic.
Good morning. I'm still thinking about the mini sticks.
Yeah, the mini sticks.
From before that Scott Regehr was talking about when they were talking about defending Connor Hellebuck, and he only faced 17 shots on goal last night, so didn't have to work as hard, but the team working hard behind him. That's all you can ask for those greasy goals, as Rick Bowness called it before. We'll start with the traffic. Not a very greasy morning out there on the roads. Not too slick. We're not hearing about too many problems. We had a motor vehicle collision earlier that has already been cleared out of the way. So far, a smooth drive for your Thursday morning. If you see anything else out there, though, that we're not hearing about yet, we'd love to hear about it. So you can give us a call on the traffic line 204-788-3093. Now over to the weather forecast, Emily. Extreme cold warning still in effect this morning up north in the northwestern corner of the province in the Lac Brochet area all the way down towards Leaf Rapids. That extreme cold warning is not affecting Churchill though, but do not be fooled. It is still very, very chilly out there with a wind chill of -42 in Churchill this morning. Expecting mainly sunny skies and a high of -27, -38 with the wind chill later on this afternoon. You could expect skies to clear tonight and the overnight low falling to -33, again -43 with the wind chill. Here in the city of Winnipeg, currently -15 over at the Forks, and we're expecting a mix of sun and cloud here today with winds out of the northwest and a high of -12. Wind chill values in around the -28 range for today, and then partly cloudy skies for tonight. The overnight low falling to -23, and the wind chill will feel like -31 overnight. So not crazy cold, but definitely enough to remind you that, yes, winter is definitely still a thing here in the city of Winnipeg. Over to Brandon, -16 currently, and a slight chance of some flurries to fall in southwestern Manitoba today, and winds shifting to the northwest with a high of -13 today, -27 with the wind chill values. We'll see clearing skies tonight and the wind chill falling to -38 overnight in Brandon. Haven't talked about our friends in Thompson yet. -8, or Thompson, I should say. Dauphin is where I'm looking at, actually. A mix of sun and cloud. Again, a slight chance of flurries this morning. A high of -13 today, -23 with the wind chill. Now over to Thompson, where things are not quite as cold as they are at Churchill, but again, -37 with the wind chill up there. You'll see clearing skies today. Thompson, a high of -21, and the wind chill falling to -28 this afternoon. A quick look at some other current conditions across the province. It is -14 in Morden and Winkler, a mix of sun and cloud. The Pembina Valley actually seeing some of the hot spots this morning around -11. And we are looking at -14 in Verdon, and they are also seeing that slight chance of flurries this morning that we were talking about for southwestern Manitoba. And to our friends in the White Shell, you can expect a mix of sun and cloud today with a high of -16. Once again, if you see anything else out there on Manitoba highways this morning, the traffic line's the place to call, 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Nolan.
Of course.
That's CBC's Nolan Kaler. And yes, it's chillier. I swapped out my gloves for mitts, added an extra layer. Hope you're all staying warm out there. It's coming up on 7:40, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass. Well, beading creates beautiful art, but it can also create lifelong friendships. That's according to Two-Spirit Mi'kmaq beadwork artist Terrence Woodland. They were invited to show off some of their pieces in a workshop at the Eagle Urban Transition Center. We sent CBC's Itzi Loverin to chat with Terrence about Two-Spirit identity and the connection to their culture through beading.
Whatever your heart desires, lanyards, earrings. Yep, well, everyone wants to do lanyards today. They're all very sold today.
I see you have some beadwork on the table here. Can you describe these medallions?
One flower here in particular has different shades of purple, and it's got black and white stripe detailing. The leaves have different shades of green, so it's detailed. It looks real. It's covered in a beautiful sparkly bronze detailing. But when I do florals, I try to make it so that it has a bit of my Two-Spirit pride in it, so I use rainbow colors. But when it comes to the actual design color palette, I actually just use colors that look fun. My beadwork mostly consists of a mixture of different styles between Northeastern Woodland Mi'kmaq and Plains Cree.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Can you tell me how you started beading?
Absolutely. So I was about 18, and actually I started beading during a bit of a dark period in my time. I unfortunately lost my birth mother without knowing her, and I wanted to reconnect with not only my Indigenous heritage, but being Mi'kmaq in general. Beadwork is medicine. It doesn't matter what you're doing, beadwork is medicine because it connects you with those teachings. And when you're dancing, it represents you. You have to be able to speak about yourself through your beadwork. And even if it doesn't make sense to everybody, that's not the point. The point is you can feel handsome or beautiful with what you're wearing. And you can say with a lot of pride, I made this. That's the best feeling for me, is saying I made this. This is my medicine. My beadwork usually lays flat and clean because because you want the best of what you do. And if your beadwork is clean, you feel proud. I get people all the time like being hard on themselves because their beadwork isn't even, or you can see this thread in between, thinking, you know what? You're learning. There's nothing wrong with having a little bit of bumpy beadwork, but learn what works for you over time.
So can you tell me a bit about the workshop that you're holding today? Who is this workshop for?
This workshop is really for anybody who wants to learn how to bead, those who already know how to bead, or those who want to expand their skills. I've been told my beadwork is pretty phenomenal. I'm trying to be humble, but I love beading. So I was told that at a young age that when we learn these gifts, when we learn our skills, we have to pass on because it's not our job to hold it. We have to teach, because then, especially if our youth see that, if our youth especially see us beading and crafting and dancing and sewing and being traditional like that, it gives them opportunities to live a better life too. And it's identity. It's all about identity.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the connection between being Two-Spirit and beading?
For me, I dance contemporary jingle dress, which is traditionally a women's style of dance. For me, it's healing. If you walk authentically, the burden goes away. When it comes to beading, I'm somebody who definitely expresses being Two-Spirit through my beading because, like I said, I don't like putting a gender on myself like that. Especially if you dance in medicine dress. It doesn't go very well with some people, which is fine. But I do it for, again, it's decolonizing.
What are some of the barriers that there are for connecting as a Two-Spirit person in the beading community?
Actually, it's pretty interesting because some of the best beaters I've ever seen, the people who have just deadly talent, are Two-Spirit people because they are free from the boundaries of what is traditional and what isn't. It's not about the beadwork needs to speak for itself. And if you can produce the best of yourself, then there's nothing that can stop you. There's no limitations. That's what being Two-Spirit reflects through my beadwork.
That was Terrence Woodland talking about their connection to culture as a Two-Spirit Mi'kmaq beadwork artist. It's 7:45 and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass. Well, another man was shot dead this week by police, and Winnipeg police say the number of mental health calls continues to go up. On Tuesday, the Winnipeg Police Tactical Support Team was called to a home in the North End. Officers say they were asked to apprehend a man and take him to hospital for an involuntary examination under the province's Mental Health Act. They say the man refused, appearing agitated, and barricaded himself into the home. When police went in to bring him out, they say the man discharged a fire extinguisher at them. They say the man confronted police with a long-edged weapon, and that's when he was shot. Here's some of what Acting Police Chief Art Stannard told reporters yesterday.
It is tragic. It's whenever a police interaction results in a death. No family wants to hear that their loved ones died during a police encounter. Nobody does. It's also tragic for the community as well. Like the family, they're asking questions, and they're asking questions why and what happened. Today, the service gave you a summary, but a brief summary of the events leading up to the use of force encounter. This information is limited because the incident is now in the hands of IAU. But we felt, as a service, it was important to provide some information to you so you can get out to your readers and your listeners and try to put a little concept to it. That's all I have to say. I know this is going to be an open question, but I want to say just one more thing, please. I want to conclude by saying something about our members. No police officer or their families want to be involved in a lethal force encounter. Police officers take an oath to protect lives, and they take that oath very seriously. They respect the life. They want to help people. In this case, they were mandated by the Mental Health Act to take the male into custody and take him for a medical assessment.
Good morning. My name is Bonnie Emerson. I'm the Superintendent of Community Engagement with the Winnipeg Police Service. To provide some context, Chief Smythe noted the number of calls that we respond to under the well-being category. The well-being events continue to trend upward compared to previous years. It remains the top citizen-generated call for service that the Winnipeg Police Service responds to for the 4th year in a row. The WPS attended to 21,000 well-being checks. That's an average of 58 a day, an increase of 4% over 2022 and 16% higher than the 5-year average. Some of these may or may not involve calls involving mental health. Mental health can deeply impact people's well-being. Events are emotionally charged, and our members have limited information when they're responding.
That was Winnipeg Police Superintendent of Community Engagement, Bonnie Emerson. And before her, you heard from Acting Police Chief Art Stannard. The full press conference is on the Winnipeg Police Service's YouTube page. Joining us now in studio is Mayor Scott Gillingham for our monthly talk segment. Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning, Emily.
So let's start with your reaction to that story about police. How concerned are you about the number of mental health calls for police being on the rise?
Well, first of all, my sincere condolences to this family who have lost a loved one. And as you point out, Emily, and as the police point out, the number of calls the police are receiving related to wellness checks and the number of mental health calls does continue to climb and trend upward. And that's a concern, especially when police show up and if there's a weapon involved, they have, they're put in a difficult situation. Now, we do have the ARC program, the Alternative Response to Citizen Crisis Program, which is important and is growing and showing signs of good results. But they're called in. The ARC program is called in, when there's not a violent situation, when it's safe enough to do so. But if we as a community can get to individuals who are struggling with mental health sooner, if there can be prevention, obviously, that's really what we need to get to so that police are not called in these circumstances.
And is that something the city is working on?
We are working in partnership with the province of Manitoba on that. And just to go back to that ARC program, we have said as a city that we are ready. Our police are ready to add more officers. The ARC program is a case where you have a plain-clothes police officer with a mental health worker, a support worker, that partner together and respond to individuals who are in maybe having a mental health crisis or can even do preventative work. We have police officers ready to go. The province, thankfully, recently, this government has just announced they're going to hire 100 more individuals. And some of those individuals can go to help us collectively expand our ARC program and serve people with mental health better.
Meanwhile, looking at the use of lethal force, this is the 5th person who died after interactions with Winnipeg police just over the last 4 months, and 3 of them were related to mental distress calls. Can you help us understand what oversight City Hall has over the Winnipeg Police Service, especially when it comes to things like that?
Well, the mayor and council and even the police board cannot direct the operations of the police service. But the police board is put in place under provincial legislation, and one of the legislative roles of the board is to ensure that the police service is delivered in a manner that's consistent with the needs and the values and the expectations of the community. And that's specific. Those words are right from the legislation. So the police board puts in place policy to ensure that police are operating in a way that is what the community would expect. And one of the things that we'll be discussing as a police board, I sit on the board. Councillor Marcus Chambers is the chair of the board. But I sit on the board, and one of the things we will be discussing at the next public police board meeting is asking the police to explain how they respond to mental health calls.
And that next Winnipeg board meeting is in March. What other questions will you have?
Well, I think first of all, we'll just ask the police to explain, what their protocols are related to how they, when they respond to or get a call related to they lose their lives. It's tragic. Nobody wants it. You heard the deputy chief talk about, acting chief Stannard talk about, even the police don't want it. I believe him on that. The police officers I know do want to go to work, do their job well, and protect the community and protect life.
That's going to be quite the conversation. So pivoting to the budget, the latest 2024 Winnipeg budget, we know that 3 city pools are slated to close. 2 of them in St. Boniface. The other is the Eldon Ross pool in the Brooklands neighborhood. And in St. Boniface, these will be the 2nd and 3rd pools to close since 2019. What would you say to people in that community who are frustrated to be losing these amenities?
Well, difficult decisions, tough budget decisions had to be made. And so I can absolutely appreciate that people in St. Boniface or other places where they may be losing an amenity where we're looking at decommissioning something would be frustrated. I think what's important to understand that is in St. Boniface, for example, in close proximity to the Windsor Park pool, which is one of the ones that we're looking at decommissioning, is the Bonnie Vitel pool. And so we are making a $9 million investment in the Bonnie Vitel pool, which is a year-round pool. And we get to this place, Emily, where we've got city assets that are aging, some of them very old, And we have to make the decision whether or not to put more money into old infrastructure or to start investing in new. And so this budget also includes $20 million of brand new investment in spray pads, which are new aquatic features, new aquatic facilities that are really, really popular right now. They don't require lifeguards to be present. I know, I understand a spray pad is not the same as a swimming pool. I understand that. But these are new investments of $20 million that we're looking to make over the next several years.
But I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, it's not a pool. I mean, a pad is for 5-year-olds. What about older kids? They might not have transportation to get to the Bonnie Vital pool, and older people who are trying to get some exercise. I mean, what would you say to them losing that?
Well, the Windsor Park pool and the Bonnie Vital pool, I think, are about 2 kilometers or less than 2 kilometers from one another. Happy Land is just a little bit further down the way. Both Happy Land pool and Windsor Park combined need investments of around $7-8 million just to upgrade them. We've had an issue related to a rising water table that has affected some of our outdoor pools as well. And they're seasonal pools. Those are both outdoor pools, Happy Land and Windsor Park, that are not heated. As I said, though, just not too far from their Bonnie Vital pool, we are making a $9 million investment to upgrade that pool.
Still a bit far, though, for someone without a car.
I can appreciate these are difficult decisions, and if money wasn't an object, we could do it all. But we have to make decisions, and I think the residents also expect us to make decisions related to value for money and looking at some of the assets that the city has, as I said, that are aging, that are very, very old. Many of the city's facilities were there present in the respective communities before Unicity. St. Bonavus has more pools in that community per capita than most other places. In fact, there's 8 wards. 8 of the 15 wards don't even have a pool. And so it's a difficult decision. I do appreciate that, but we are making the investment in Bonnie Vital and in spray pads.
So shifting now to the Arlington Bridge, the budget made no mention of plans for repairs or replacement. We've heard from Winnipeggers who say the bridge is a vital link for people in that area, especially for those who don't have a car to drive to another bridge. Why wasn't that made a priority in the budget?
Well, we have been consistent. The Arlington Bridge, Chief Peguis Trail Extension, the Kennesaw Route 90 projects are all capital works that we are waiting on reports on. So we had indicated early that, I'd said before, don't expect any of these projects, any of the 3 of them, to be reflected in the budget because we have to get the information back first from the consultants who are doing work on each of those projects, including Arlington Bridge, to find out what the next steps are. So there was no money in the budget this year because we still need the information before we can make a determination.
How long do you think that's going to take?
We should have information on all 3 of those projects, certainly within this year. Within the coming months, I expect most of those reports back in the first 6 months of this year.
Okay. And so, of course, we've been talking about the budget and, what isn't in it. What do you see as the upside of the spending plan?
Well, there's a lot of, I think, really, really good investment in this budget. We have a 45% increase in tree pruning and tree planting. Expanded library hours. A new library is going in the northwest corner of Winnipeg. We've increased funding to 311. There's an increase to arts funding as well, with a new, among other things, a new capital grant to the arts of it'll be $2 million over 4 years. There's also next generation 911 service to improve our emergency response, and there's new transit routes coming, especially in the newer suburbs. There's at least 4 new transit routes coming to expand our transit service to Winnipeggers.
And just quickly before you go, the last 30 seconds or so, there's a lot happening this weekend. What are you going to be up to, Mayor?
There is a lot happening. Of course, we're celebrating Winnipeg 150, and I'm going to take in the Winnipeg Gallery at the Manitoba Museum. They have a Winnipeg Gallery celebrating Winnipeg 150. So if you get a chance to, if listeners get a chance to check out the Manitoba Museum, I encourage them to do that. And I'm taking in Festival de Voyageur as well. Heyho.ca is the website for all festival information, and that's always a great winter activity for family and friends.
Good times. Well, say hi to the mayor if you're out there and you see him there. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, Emily.
That's Mayor Scott Gillingham. Turning now to the headlines, Heather Wells joins us from the newsroom.
Good morning. Well, the chief of Peguis First Nation has questions about a land flip involving a choice piece of property on Wellington Crescent. In 2022, a Peguis-controlled company bought the old Shriners Hospital from the province as part of their treaty land entitlement agreement. 6 months later, the trust flipped it to a private developer. The new chief is upset about that transaction. We'll hear more. And the deaths in Carmen of 2 women and 3 children on Sunday added extra significance to last night's Valentine's Day march. Hundreds turned out in Winnipeg. We'll take you there in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells. Well, still to come in the show, in 2022, Peguis First Nation acquired some of the most desirable residential land in Winnipeg. The new chief of Peguis wants to know why that land was flipped to a private developer just 7 months later. We'll tell you about the sale and resale of Wellington Crescent land. All that and more still to come on Information Radio.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Paul Giamatti has been in dozens of films and TV shows, from Private Parts, WNBC, to the Alexander Payne movie Sideways that he acted in 20 years ago. Now Paul's reunited with Alexander for the new film The Holdovers. He'll tell you about that and being nominated for Best Actor.
Presto, Cherry's Jubilee.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
As a kid, Susanna Breslin was followed by people with clipboards taking notes. She didn't find out until years later that she was part of a study. Susanna Breslin on a childhood spent as a human lab rat. Coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. A Liberal MP charged with defending Canada's foreign policy has been recorded criticizing the government's response to the war in Gaza. Toronto MP Rob Oliphant is a United Church minister. He is also the parliamentary secretary to Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs. CBC News has obtained a recording of him meeting with a constituent. In it, Oliphant says he has struggled with the Trudeau government's decisions and he's considered quitting his post. Evan Dyer has the details.
Do I believe there's genocidal activity on the part of Israel? Probably yes.
MP Rob Oliphant was nothing if not sincere in his Zoom meeting with a constituent lobbying him to back a ceasefire, but his remarks often strayed far from the party line.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It's Oliphant's job to explain the government's foreign policy in Parliament, including its decision to defund UNRWA, the UN agency that supports Palestinian refugees.
Helping the crisis in Gaza. We are proud. Canadians want us to help.
But in private, Oliphant sounded anything but proud of that decision.
My heart hurts because the only way to get that aid there is UNRWA.
Oliphant described the decision to defund UNRWA as political.
It drives me crazy. It is opportunistic. It is unfair. And it is maligning the operation of a UN organization.
Rob Oliphant also criticized the Trudeau government's confusing response to the International Court of Justice's interim ruling in a genocide case brought against Israel by South Africa, saying it was a communications disaster.
I would not have done what the government did. I advised the government not to do that. Because I think it was misunderstood, and I knew it would be misunderstood.
Oliphant said he'd thought about quitting his post many times, but been persuaded that he could do more good by staying. Asked about the tape, Oliphant told CBC News it was a private meeting that he wishes had remained private, but that there's nothing he says in private that he won't stand by in public. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is joining his counterparts from Australia and New Zealand in raising concerns about an Israeli ground operation in Rafah. In a joint statement, they say such an operation would be catastrophic. The 3 leaders reissued their call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Here's what Trudeau said yesterday while meeting with Jordan's King Abdullah.
We need to see the release of hostages. We need to see a sustainable ceasefire. We need to see more humanitarian aid flowing in. We need to see stabilization in the region, peace, and we need to work on the 2-state solution.
Rafah is the last refuge for about 1.4 million displaced Palestinians in southern Gaza. Canada's intelligence agency is keeping a close eye on threats to Canada's 2S LGBTQ+ community. Many of them are coming from what CSIS calls the anti-gender movement. The CBC's Catherine Tunney has the details.
It's disheartening, and also it's not surprising.
Alessandro Kelly is executive director of Fierté Canada Pride. He's reacting to mounting warnings from Canada's intelligence agency about potential attacks on Pride events and towards the community at large.
There is not a day that goes by that I don't open my computer screen or my television to see something that attacks our community.
A CISA spokesperson says the movement poses a violent threat to the 2S LGBTQ+ community and could inspire an attack. A threat CISA says will certainly persist over the next year.
We are concerned about hate-fueled marches colliding with pride celebrations.
CISA's director, David Mignot, raised the issue publicly in a speech late last year, calling out extremist actors.
Many of whom are consuming toxic media online, becoming radicalized, and may mobilize quickly to violence.
Kelly says he worries recent provincial announcements around things like pronouns and gender-affirming care will heighten the threat risk. A spokesperson for CISA stressed not all rhetoric leads to violence, but added those belonging to the anti-gender movement may be motivated by other extreme views. Catherine Tunney, CBC News, Ottawa.
NATO defense ministers are meeting in Brussels. Officially, they're there to talk about more military support for Ukraine. But after Donald Trump's recent comments, some European countries are talking about starting their own common defense plan. Ishan Garg has more from Brussels.
Ramping up the supply of ammunition and bigger spending on defense from member countries. All of this is on the table as the bloc's defense ministers and the NATO-Ukraine Council discuss ways to expand more support to Ukraine. But concerns about the bloc's future are looming large. European leaders have urged the EU to decrease its reliance on the US and have called for more spending by the bloc towards a common European defense program, leading some critics to question, could the NATO soon become obsolete? But the Secretary-General of the 31-nation military alliance, Jens Stoltenberg, is urging Europe and North America to continue to work together.
And we should not pursue any path that indicates that we are trying to divide Europe from North America. The strength is that we have Europe and North America together in NATO.
Intelligence agencies have warned that Russia could double its troops along NATO's borders in the next decade. Stoltenberg says an increasing number of NATO member states are spending the targeted 2% of GDP on defense. Ashan Garg for CBC News, Brussels.
The Kremlin is dismissing U.S. warnings about Russian nuclear weapons in space. On Wednesday, the head of an intelligence committee suggested Moscow is creating a serious national security threat. Russian officials call that a malicious fabrication to foster anti-Russian sentiment. The CBC's Richard Madden is following this story for us. And Richard, what more do we know about this security threat?
Yeah, according to multiple reports here, this security threat relates to Russia's space ambitions and its plans to eventually develop a nuclear anti-satellite system designed to target U.S. satellites. And that's what caused the chair of the powerful House Intelligence Committee, Mike Turner, to issue that unusual, vague warning yesterday of a serious national security threat, saying he released details of it to all members of Congress and then urged President Joe Biden to declassify the intel. Now, this move caught the White House off guard and sparked high anxieties on Capitol Hill, forcing House Speaker Mike Johnson to go before the cameras and attempt to downplay concerns.
I want to assure the American people there is no need for public alarm. We are going to work together to address this matter. And beyond that, I'm not at liberty to disclose classified information and really can't say much more.
Now, since then, top U.S. officials have briefed its international allies, including Canada, and a meeting with top defense officials and congressional lawmakers is set for later today.
What happens next?
Yeah, I'm expecting we'll learn more details of this security threat as the day progresses, and really what motivated the House Intelligence Chairman to make this public one day before his scheduled briefing on the issue. Now, it's worth noting Congressman Turner is a defense hawk and a strong supporter of Ukraine in its war against Russia, and his statement was released just as lawmakers debate how the U.S. should deal with threats from Russia and its adversaries, including billions in foreign aid.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Prince Harry is in British Columbia today. He is promoting the first ever Winter Invictus Games. That happens a year from now. And as Lindsay Duncombe reports, it is a chance for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to regroup after a bumpy time.
Cheers greet Prince Harry as he glides to the bottom of the ski hill. He's in a sit ski, an adaptive device for wheelchair athletes. Just one of the events that will be featured at next year's Winter Invictus Games. Prince Harry founded the Games for wounded servicemen and women. Rosa Sanchez Bermudez will participate in the alpine ski competition. She was shot twice in Colombia and uses a wheelchair. Through a translator, she describes meeting the prince.
Super happy. Emocionada. Yeah, very emotional.
The trip to BC comes as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex could use some good press. They just rebranded their website after The Hollywood Reporter put them at the top of the losers list for 2023. Recent polls have the couple trailing Queen Camilla in popularity. Victoria Murphy is a royal commentator.
So I think this is going to be a very important week for them. I think it's going to be a really positive week for them because even though the Sussexes do get a lot of criticism, I think people are really reluctant to criticise him at all in any way when he is with Invictus because everyone understands what an important cause it is.
Royal watchers can expect to see more action from the couple over the coming days. They will be at Whistler Sliding Centre later today and will participate in a wheelchair curling demonstration on Friday. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Whistler.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, our website, and the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Happy Thursday, or as I like to call it, Friday Eve. Here's what's still to come on the show. Peguis First Nation was swindled out of its original home more than a century ago. Now the new chief of Peguis is upset about a much more recent land transaction. In 2022, the First Nation acquired some of the most desirable residential land in Winnipeg, and the new chief wants to know why that land was flipped to a private developer just 7 months later. We'll talk to you about the sale and resale of Wellington Crescent land. It's minus 15 at the Forks, going up today to a high of minus 12. Information Radio continues. 11 minutes after 8 o'clock, and Heather Wells has the headlines.
Good morning. The grieving mother of a 17-year-old killed in Carmen on Sunday is speaking out. She believes child welfare authorities ignored her concerns about safety, placing her daughter in a potentially dangerous situation. We're going to hear from her coming up. And Prime Minister Trudeau will be in Winnipeg today with the Premier announcing health bilateral agreements, funding to help Manitoba lower health-related wait times. We'll hear about that as well in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. And joining us now in studio is Nolan Kaler with a look at the weather and traffic.
Good morning. Still looking at an extreme cold warning for much of northern Manitoba. It is actually extended since I was last talking to you about the weather to now affect the region in around Gillam. Churchill, not under the extreme cold warning, but still very, very cold. Wind chill values around minus 42 for this morning. Mainly sunny skies and a high of minus 27. And you can expect the wind chills to be in around the minus 38 range for this afternoon. So do take precautions with the cold that seems to have finally settled in here in Manitoba after an interesting temperatured winter thus far.
And we're talking about frostbite again. It's been a while since we used that word.
It's been a minute. Here in Winnipeg, we've actually lost a degree since the start of the show. Currently, minus 16 at the Forks. You can expect a mix of sun and cloud with some northwest winds and a high of minus 12 for today. You can expect the wind chill values to be in around the minus 20 range later on this afternoon. Currently, with the wind chill, feels like minus 28 out there. For Brandon, you're also at minus 16 right now, and you can expect a slight chance chance of flurries in southwestern Manitoba today. That'll be clearing up as we go throughout the day, though. A high of minus 13 for Brandon. Wind chill values are going to feel a little bit closer to minus 19 this afternoon, currently around minus 27. Over on the commute, a new issue to tell you about southbound Kenniston at Grant. There's a stalled truck blocking the southbound curb lane, so keep left to pass whenever there's a stall in that part of the city, especially on Route 90. You know that's going to cause some pretty big delays, so keep left to get around that stalled truck. If you see anything else out there on your commute in the final half hour of Information Radio, you can give us a call on the CBC commuter line. The number is 204-788-3093.
Coming up on 14 minutes after 8 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, a year and a half ago, Peguis First Nation acquired some of the most desirable residential land in Winnipeg. Now, the new chief of Peguis wants to know why that land was flipped to a private developer. CBC's Bartley Kivas joins us now in studio to talk about the story that he put together with CBC's Joanne Levisser. Good morning, Bartley.
Good morning, Emily.
So what land are we talking about?
Well, the land in question is at 611 Wellington Crescent. There's almost 3 acres of land in this plot, and it's right on the Assiniboine River. As most Winnipeggers know, this is one of the most desirable residential areas in the city. From 1949 until 2016, there was a children's hospital there and later a rehab center. The rehab center closed in 2016. The provincial government declared that land surplus a few years later. And at first, the province offered it up to First Nations eligible to acquire Crown lands under the Treaty Land Entitlement process.
Okay, remind us, what is the Treaty Land Entitlement process?
Well, that's a process intended to compensate First Nations that didn't receive all the land they were entitled to under the treaties. In the case of 611 Wellington Crescent, the province says it offered up the land to 5 eligible First Nations. The province said only one First Nation expressed an interest, Peguis First Nation. Now, historically, the Crown did not treat Peguis well. The Peguis Reserve used to encompass really fertile agricultural fields on the east side of the Red River at St. Peter's near East Selkirk. But in 1907, Peguis was forced illegally to surrender that land. The entire community was relocated to the Northern Interlake, and more than a century later, Peguis won large settlements from the federal government, but the community continues to suffer, notably from flooding in many springs.
And what does that have to do with the land in Winnipeg?
Okay, so in July 2022, a numbered company controlled by Peguis bought 611 Wellington Crescent. The province says this was under the Treaty Land Entitlement process. About 7 months later, in January 2023, that numbered company was sold and the land is now owned by a private developer. Stan Bird was elected chief of Peguis First Nation a few months after the land was flipped. He says he's upset Peguis is once again out of land.
Land is important to our people. Land for our people is not a commodity. Our land is very much tied to our culture, and without that we don't have an identity, and I believe that that's one of the reasons our people continue to struggle. So the government has to begin looking at the meaning of land. What does it mean to our people? It's not about money. It's much more than that.
Now, these transactions were overseen by a corporation called the Peguis First Nation Real Estate Trust, and that company has a stated goal of creating housing and engaging in off-reserve development. Greg Stevenson, a trustee with the Real Estate Trust, said it operates autonomously from the First Nation. He says he doesn't know why Chief Stan Bird is questioning the transactions.
It's just a normal business deal, right? So there's nothing that's different from any other business deal.
Stevenson says he's tried to meet with Bird to no avail.
So is there any reason a First Nation can't sell land it acquires under the Treaty Land Entitlement process?
Well, I asked that precise question to Yvon Guy Larocque. He's a Métis Winnipeg lawyer with expertise in treaty land entitlement. He says First Nations can do whatever they want with their land.
If there's a benefit to the nation and the members by selling a piece of land rather than adding it to reserve or developing it, I think it's the prerogative of the nation to make that decision.
Larocque also says it is common for new chiefs and councils to question the decisions of their predecessors and to make sure all policies were followed.
So what did Peguis pay the province for 611 Wellington Crescent?
$350,000. Now, in 2022, that was about the same price as the average, or value rather, as the average detached home in Winnipeg. But we're not talking about a home here. We're talking about 2.8 acres of riverfront land on Wellington Crescent. Bob M. Timniak is a broker with Capital Commercial Real Estate in Winnipeg. I asked him how much he thinks that riverfront land would have been worth on the open market. M. Timniak said the $350,000 provincial sale price was, in his words, ridiculously low.
I think there would be a list of developers longer than you could think of in the next 5 minutes that would have interest in doing that. Yeah, it'd be a very, very desirable piece of property, especially for that price.
The province said the $350,000 sale price in 2022 was based on a fair market value appraisal made by the Altus Group in 2017. Now, the province wouldn't make that appraisal public, but an official who spoke to us on condition they would not be named said the land was seriously distressed, the old hospital had to be demolished, they said hazardous material had to be removed, and the riverbank had to be stabilized. CBC News obtained an appraisal, a different appraisal, that pegged the value of the land higher. That appraisal was commissioned in 2022 by Andrew Marquis. Marquis is best known as the developer of the Parker lands in Winnipeg. He was working as a consultant for Peguis First Nation Real Estate. The appraisal he commissioned from the firm Berwadi & Associates pegged the value of the land at $1.8 million. I asked Marquis if he thought $350,000 was a fair price for 611 Wellington.
You and I don't get that opportunity. It's an interesting question, Bart. I'm not sure it's an applicable question, as I understand, the relationship between the provincial government and the surplus lands and, the Indigenous community. So it's a fair question if you want to ask it just on the face of it, but I'm not sure it's a fair question given, all the other factors of, the province's role and relationship with Indigenous communities.
According to LaRocque, the lawyer, selling Crown land below market value could be seen as economic reconciliation. The province didn't state that as a rationale for selling the land at $350,000.
So what did Peguis get when it sold the land?
Well, according to the Peguis First Nation Real Estate Trust's website, the sale price of the company that owned the Wellington Crescent land was $2.8 million. Now, that website lists the profit on the sale as $1.8 million. Financial statements for the trust suggest the profit was closer to $1.4 million. Greg Stevenson, the trustee, said the sale was good for the community.
We're trying to build a community here using our real estate trust knowledge and the people we work with and build our capacity to do good business with outside non-First Nation businesses. And this seems like it's a hurdle being built to prevent us from doing that.
Chief Stan Bird does not agree.
The whole nature of that trust was to improve the lives of our people, but that hasn't improved the life of our people.
So what's happening with the land now, Bart?
Well, the new owner is Mark Kipnis, and he has at least a 17-year track record as a Winnipeg developer. We communicated by text. He said he plans to build 14 residential homes at 611 Wellington Crescent. Now, on the website, they look like luxury bungalows. Kipnis said he plans to ask City Council to approve his development plans this spring. I asked Kipnis how he would describe this plot of land, and he said, there's nothing like it.
Thanks, Bartley. You can read more about the story Bartley wrote with Joanne Levisser on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All over Turtle Island, host Rosanna Deerchild welcomes you to Unreserved.
Indigenous peoples are retelling history through an Indigenous lens.
Unreserved, celebrating 10 years, looking back at how far we've come, and looking forward to the journey ahead.
How do we keep the story going?
Unreserved with Rosanna Deerchild. Now at a new time, Sunday afternoon at 2:30 in Newfoundland, 3 Pacific, 4 Mountain, and on demand on CBC Listen.
22 minutes after 8 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Nolan Kaler joins us now with a traffic update.
Yeah, so we got a call from Janet about power being out in North Henderson in around the McIver Avenue intersection. And it turns out that this is a power outage that is affecting nearly 1,300 customers, or 1,200 customers, I should say, in North Kildonan from Stewart Avenue almost all the way to the north perimeter. Now, this was planned work that Manitoba Hydro have been doing since the end of January, but it is going to take a little bit longer this morning to get that power restored. Manitoba Hydro currently estimating around 9:30 for the time of restoration. So if you come across an intersection that is affected by this power outage, treat it as a four-way stop and watch for pedestrians that are trying to cross the road. If you see anything else out there to let us know about in the last few minutes of Information Radio, give us a call at 204-788-3093. That's our traffic line.
Thank you, Nolan.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Nolan Kaler, and he is our studio director today on Information Radio. Three-time Juno Award winner City and Colour is playing tonight in Winnipeg at the Canada Life Centre. They're touring the release of his 2023 album, The Love Still Held Me Near. And he'll be joined by opening act Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats. From his latest album, this is Meant to Be.
When I grew up, I had big city dreams. I wondered if the Bible was wrong. What the hell were they teaching me? I was lost in thought, and I could not hide it. But the sun, it kept on rising, so I played along. But now that you're gone, and I write down this song, I don't believe this is how it's meant to be. The church bells, they ring, you can hear the mourners sing. They still believe this is how it's meant to be. The wheels touch down, all I can see is your face amidst the noise of the lights. The last thing on my mind was my faith. And then the morning came, and the sun started rising. But I was missing my friend. So how do I carry on? 'Cause now that you're gone, and I write down this song, I don't believe this is how it's meant to be. The church bells, they ring, you can hear the mourners sing. They still believe this is how it's meant to be. Like a mother bird crying out for its young, I will sing it loud with all the might in my lungs. 'Cause now that you're gone, and I write down this song, I don't believe this is how it's meant to be. The church bells, they ring, you can hear the mourners sing. They still believe this is how it's meant to be.
That was Meant to Be by City and Color, and he'll be playing tonight in Winnipeg at the Canada Life Centre. We're coming up, getting close to local news time. It's minus 16 right now at the Forks, and we're going up to a high today of minus 12, down to minus 23 tonight, and back up to minus 12 tomorrow. And so coming up on The Current, which comes right after the local news, we'll hear a case against Lululemon and test how well Canada's existing and evolving laws can prevent greenwashing. Some experts say even a new updated Competition Act won't be effective enough. That'll be on The Current, which comes up right after the local news with Heather Wells. And if you didn't catch our full show this morning, you can listen back to some of our items on the new CBC Listen app. Each morning we post a few of our interviews online for on-demand listening. This morning, you'll be able to hear our conversation with Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham about the latest death involving the Winnipeg police, the uptick in police responding to mental health calls, as well as the proposed city budget for this year. You'll also hear CBC's Corey Funk speaking with legendary Canadian comedian Ron James to hear more about how he's talking about growing older. And he really showed a little more of a serious side of Ron James in that interview. You can find all of that on your mobile device with the CBC Listen app or on your desktop at cbc.ca/listen. And there you just search for Information Radio. Also, you'll want to stay tuned to CBC Manitoba for Up to Speed. You'll hear about Winnipeg's largest school division and how it's thrilled to be able to teach their students Tagalog. And the first ever Filipino bilingual pilot program is happening in the Winnipeg school division. And we'll hear more from the school principal and a parent on how it'll affect them in class and at home. That's coming up today on Up to Speed with Faith Fundal. The show is on from 3 to 6 p.m. And again, taking a look at the forecast for Brandon. We didn't forget about you. Today it'll be mainly cloudy, slight chance of flurries this morning, clearing this afternoon and breezy with a high of minus 13. Clear, that wind becoming light this evening, low minus 27. Sunny tomorrow, becoming a mix of sun and cloud around noon. Windy in the afternoon, high minus 12. And again, for Winnipeg today, we're going up to a high of minus 12, and it'll be a mix of sun and cloud and pretty breezy as well. Coming up on time for the CBC Manitoba News, here's Heather Wells.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. Partly cloudy, minus 16 right now, and Manitoba is feeling like winter all over again. In addition to that high Emily mentioned of minus 12, we also have a risk of frostbite in Winnipeg today. The chief of Peguis First Nation has questions about a land flip involving a choice piece of property on Wellington Crescent. A Peguis-controlled company bought the old Shriners Hospital from the province as part of their treaty land entitlement agreement. That agreement makes up for land they're still owed by the Crown. The province sold the 2-acre lot for $350,000 in 2022. 6 months later, the trust flipped it to a private developer. Peguis Chief Stan Bird is upset about that transaction.
Land is important to our people. Land for our people is not a commodity. Our land is very much tied to our culture, and without that, we don't have an identity, and I believe that that's one of the reasons our people continue to struggle. It's not about money. It's much more than that.
The Peguis Real Estate Trust website says it sold the Wellington property for $2.8 million. The chair of the trust says it was a normal business deal for the benefit of the community. The grieving mother of a 17-year-old killed in Carman on Sunday is speaking out. She believes child welfare authorities ignored her concerns about safety, placing her daughter in a potentially dangerous situation. She told her story to CBC's Karen Pauls.
She was a firecracker. Beautiful.
Juliet Hastings wants people to remember her daughter Maya's life, not her tragic death.
I loved her so much.
Maya's body was found Sunday in a home in Carman. She lived there with her cousin, 30-year-old Amanda Clearwater, who was found dead earlier that morning in a highway ditch. The bodies of Clearwater's 3 young children were pulled from a burning car not long after. The RCMP accused Clearwater's partner of killing them all.
5 first-degree murder charges
against Ryan Manakisik.
Hastings says she was worried when Maya moved in with the couple. Manakisik was on bail and under court-ordered treatment for addictions and mental health.
Something dark was just festering.
Hastings says she took her concerns to the family social worker, but says nobody followed through.
She didn't do a safety placement order, and she didn't do a criminal record check.
Winnipeg CFS deferred questions to the provincial government, which said it would be inappropriate to comment during the investigation. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And taking to the streets to call for change. Hundreds marching in the annual Valentine's Day March in Winnipeg in remembrance of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people. This year's rally comes just days after those 2 women and 3 children were found dead in southern Manitoba. Organizers provided people with care packages and healing sessions to ease participants of the burdens they carry. Alea McIver helped coordinate the march.
It's unfortunate that we're still marching, and really, with very minimal steps into change, we really need drastic steps in action to really implement what community change looks like.
The first Women's Memorial March was held 32 years ago. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be in Winnipeg later today to announce 2 healthcare bilateral agreements. One is the Working Together Agreement, worth $1.2 billion over 10 years. The other is called Aging with Dignity. The funding will be used to help Manitoba lower wait times, in part to help reach its commitment to hire 400 doctors, 200 paramedics, and 100 healthcare workers. The announcement with Justin Trudeau and Premier Wab Kinew is expected around 12:30 this afternoon. Well, it is party time in the Paw. The 77th annual Northern Manitoba Trappers Festival has kicked off for another year. Board member Sonny LaValle says it's a way of preserving the history of life in the North, and it's been embraced, he says, by everyone in the area.
You go around town during this week and you'll see it. Everyone's so happy about what's going on. Everybody forgets about everything. Everyone are friends. It just blows up the whole town, both the OCN, the town, the R. McKelsey. People are just happy for this week, and it's too bad it couldn't happen 52 weeks a year.
Warm weather recently forced the cancellation of the sled dog races, but events like the Fur Queen competition, snow and ice sculpting, as well as the smoked meat and cured fish contest will go on as usual. The Trappers Festival in the Paw runs until Sunday, and another winter party as Festival de Voyageurs in St. Boniface begins tomorrow. And it will be a little chilly, adding to the proper mood for those festivities. You can find out more on all of these stories, as well as staying in step with the news of the day, at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather, is it really festival if it isn't a little cold out there?
You got to get that chill in the air.
Exactly. That makes the caribou taste all the much better.
Yeah, and it helps the maple syrup get all hardened when you roll it in the snow.
Oh, yes, I love that. Thanks for reminding me. I'm going to look forward to that now. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Have a great day. That was Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk, and joining us now in studios, Nolan Kaler with one last look at the weather and the roads.
So quickly on the roads, just to say that the power is out, affecting 1,200 customers in North Kildonan from Stewart Avenue north towards the north perimeter. So intersections in that area may be affected. So watch out for pedestrians trying to cross the street and treat those outage intersections as a 4-way stop. Also still looking southbound Kenniston at Grant with a stalled truck blocking the southbound curb lane. So keep left to pass over there. Still an extreme cold warning for our friends in northern Manitoba. Interestingly, excepting Churchill. So low wind chill values there. Looking for a high of -12 here in Winnipeg. Up to Speed is the place to find your latest traffic news for your commute home. It gets underway at 3 o'clock later on this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Nolan.
Thank you, Emily.
That's CBC's Nolan Kaler, our studio director today. Our technician, May McKillop, and producing our YouTube channel today is Brad Lillies. I'm Emily Brass, and I was filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. She'll be back tomorrow. The Current is up next.